Good evening, family. It is Monday evening, 9 p.m. Well, a little bit after 9. I'm still within that 10-minute podcast time frame, so about 9:06. So I appreciate everybody that's going to check out the live tonight. Anybody that's going to check out the playback, it's going to be a great conversation with Gabriel Piemonte. I just wanted to get a couple things set before we got going. Gabe's campaign manager, Brother Marlon Watson, is going to be joining us soon. So we're just waiting him to get onto the stream. And we're going to be talking politics mainly for Chicago because Gabe is running for alderman in Ward 5 in Chicago. But as I like to do, is I like to put someone else's situation where I'm at, and I want to talk about local politics on my end after we get Gabe's platform out and people really understand which angle he's coming from. I'm fortunate to catch him before the election here because he's been on pretty much everybody's podcast. He's been busy, been doing his own lives, been, just beating the pavement. So I am fortunate to have him on Freedmen Media. And we're going to do some things that are on the traditional end. And then there's going to be some things that we're going to do on the, Freedmen Media end. I like to go a little bit different with some things, but it's all going to be in pocket just because I believe that Gabe is a true ally and I love his platform. I love what he's talking about. He just doesn't have talking points like the quintessential. He's really doing it out here. And if Marlon Watson wasn't riding with him, then, I would actually second guess how thorough he was. But because he has somebody like Marlon Watson as a campaign manager, that shows that he's serious about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back down and hit my intro, send my shares out. And by the time the intro is done, we should have Brother Marlon and Gabriel Piemonte here to chop it up with Freedmen Media.
This revolution is filled with so many ironies, really. First, you tell us that it is manly to keep your word, right? If you are a man, you keep your word. And now all of the black people in this country are demanding, and even the black people in the whole world are demanding, is that you keep your word. You told us we were free. Well, then show us that we're free. You told us that there is justice, equality for all in this country. Well, then stick to your word and let us see the justice and equality for all. Or else admit to us that you're not a man, you're a worm, you're afraid of us, you're afraid to give us equal stand. You're afraid that if you give us equal ground, that we will match you and we will override you.
kill all the black folks you want, baby. But you will not kill the freedom of black folks. It's coming. We're going to get it. We fought every one of your damn lousy wars, baby, and you give us nothing. Now the war is going to be here, but we're going to be free. Now you kill you want to, but we kill too.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. And once again, I forget that last drop that Helliver put in there. Send a shout out to my man DJ Helliver for the intro. I now use it on a regular basis if I'm in the studio, and I've come to actually really like my intro. I'm here for a special reason tonight because we're just a little bit more than a week away from the alderman election in Chicago, and we have a candidate that is on Freedmen Media tonight, and he's going to break down what he's doing in Chicago and what his goals are for his ward. And he speaks, for the advocacy of American Freedmen. And for anybody that's out there slow and they don't know me, I do not associate with the identity of an African American, as a black man, as a person of color, as a minority. I am an American Freedman, where people may have known me when I was using a hashtag a few years back. That's transcended into what I really know from what I thought I knew. And we'll talk a little bit about that because we have somebody who was very instrumental in that movement, actually one of the pillars of that movement. And we're going to get into that in just a second. But we've got Gabriel Piemonte here to talk about his plans for Ward 5 in Chicago. And I just really want to introduce him, have him say hello, but then have him back step just a bit because I want to bring his campaign manager up. And a lot of people always get on me like, when they say, what you doing talking to them folks? What you doing talking to them folks? How come you talking to them folks? And I'm like, look, I talk for anybody that advocates for us. And if I feel that they're on the right side of history, then I want to rock with them. Pigmentation does not do anything for me where it comes to politics. It just does not. So I've got people that look just like me that do nothing for us. And then now we've got people that are looking to form an allegiance with American Freedmen. I'm going to rock with them. And, I as everybody knows, you might not be my color, but you just light-skinned. Gabe, you just light-skinned. Just know that. I don't look at you as white. You just light-skinned. So you my brother, and we'll talk about who Gabe is, where he's from, what he's about. But I just want to introduce you, and I don't know if I need to or not, because I done seen you on like 30 different podcasts. So I'm going to introduce you to Freedmen Media people. I got about 12 viewers out there, but I want to introduce Alderman candidate for Ward 5, Chicago, Illinois, Mr. Gabriel Piemonte. How you doing, brother? His audio went out again. Uh-oh, I got him muted. That's me. Very unprofessional. There we go. Hold on one second.
All right.
There we go. There we go, Gabe. There we go.
Business. Wonderful.
Yes,
wonderful.
we are.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, I appreciate you for this opportunity so very much. And it's just terrific to be here with you and your probably slightly more than 12 viewers.
I'll have probably about 25 tonight, Gabe. You're gonna bring my numbers up tonight. You're gonna swell my room up tonight. but what I'm used to is a lot of playback viewers. I don't get a lot of live viewers. I'm not the quintessential YouTuber. I get it. So I come up when I come up, and it is what it is. But now I've learned the dynamics of all the viewers and all that stuff. It's kind of playing against people like myself. I don't talk about real popular stuff in the eyes of YouTube and all these other people. Now, if I was doing some goofy stuff, I could probably go viral. But because I'm talking about something substantive, they miss us with it. You really got to get big out here. So, but I wanted to bring you in just because I like what you're doing. I like your mission.
Thank you.
And it's sincere. I mean, you can get the word salad from a lot of people out here. But I've seen you work. And like I said, the person that you're working directly with, who we're going to bring up here shortly,
he's incredible.
He's an incredible dude. And where he is now from where he was before, I'm just glad that he hung with it, because he had every reason to walk away from this crazy movement
really
that we're
did.
in.
Yep.
And
Yep.
he stayed with it, man. And he stayed with it. And he's finding people like yourself to partner with to really push the American Freedmen's needle to the next step, and that's beautiful. So we might as well just segue that. I'm an old DJ, so we're going to segue that record from the next record. But Brother Marlon, I appreciate you coming up today too, just because we've been rocking together since the ADOS movement. I was literally a fly on the wall, but I saw who was really doing stuff out there, and that's why I hung in. And you had to block everybody, and I'm glad I was one of them people that was able to hang on the other side of American Freedmen. But I was really enamored with the way you took care of business on that hashtag side, and I just wanted to work with real people. And you was a thorough cat back then. You're a thorough cat now. And as we move forward, I love the way you continue to lock in with the right politicians. Anybody can just be a campaign manager or whatever, but you're locking in with the right people. So that's really why I want to rock with you. I want to rock with Gabe, and hopefully some of this can really drip towards Southeast Michigan, where I'm at, because we need some help out here. We definitely need some help. And I'm looking to definitely take something from this discussion tonight and move it forward in my village. But what's going on, brother?
Well, thank you, Brother Shannon. Thank you, my brother, for having us on. I was going to tell you, but you just kind of revealed why. I was going to say that you have a very crisp media voice, but you just said you were a DJ. So
I used to be in radio back in the day.
No, you sound like it.
Thank you.
I've always thought that.
Thank you.
I always thought that, but I appreciate you.
I'm just not an old grumpy Negro, dog. I done did a couple things in my life. I'm not just an old grumpy Negro. But it is what it is. But
no, I definitely appreciate your stick-to-itiveness, as they
appreciate
say.
it.
You do your thing, man. And like you said, we met on the journey, on the ADOS journey. And for those that may not know, so people aren't clear. Yvette and Tone had a political YouTube show, and they met Darity, and it developed from just data into reparations. And then I was introduced to them via Boyce Watkins' channel, and end up getting inspired by just them talking about data and stuff like that. And shortly after that, I was introduced to them. I got a personal intro from a mutual friend of Yvette, and flew out here to Chicago to kick off the ADOS chapters, ADOS movement. And so it started here in Chicago. And when I say it started in Chicago, I'm not saying I created the conception of ADOS. That's Darity. The data,
absolutely,
who gets reparations, how much they get, it being a particular lineal group, reparations being the only answer for the wealth gap in a freedman community. That's all Darity.
Okay.
But it being chapters and boots on the ground and talking to folks and getting in the streets and door to door talking to politicians, that started in Chicago. And that's why I flew Yvette out here a few years ago. She stayed at my house for a few days.
Really?
Yeah. People, I need to tell the story. I don't think people know.
Please, because most people only knew what I was talking about. They don't know the origin of this thing. Yeah. Because I jumped in, nobody would really jump. By the time I jumped out, then everybody was like, "What's that ADOS thing you talking about?" I'm like, man, if you don't get out of here with that, please start from the beginning, because it started with people like you. It was you.
No, people. Yeah, I don't know why I just assumed, because people around me knew it, so I just assumed. I don't know, but I've never really said anything outside of on Twitter here and there. But maybe one day I may do a whole expose on how the whole thing progressed. It's a lot of people added and built the movement. A lot of people did, but the conception of, hey, let's start some chapters and let's get it on the road. And I told Yvette, I was like, look, I want to take you and Tone and Cosby and Darity and fly y'all around the country, and we set up chapters in each city, and they'll do an event, and at the event we'll fly y'all out. And y'all blow the event up and add to the chapter membership, and y'all go to the next city, and we could build this thing out. I had a massive plan. It was crazy. But that whole idea of doing that started in Chicago. So just for people.
Wow.
It was a hell of a journey.
Okay. So, I mean, and that blows my mind, because I didn't come in that early. I didn't know any of that. It was already moving. The train was already moving. So I didn't know any of that stuff.
As a matter of fact, actually, I wish I could find that screen cap, but I screen captured something before Yvette was even talking about descendants of slaves or anything like that. Her show was called Breaking Brown.
Right.
She would always say, Breaking Brown family. And so before Darity or any of that, I was like, I was just intrigued by the fact that I didn't know Black people were as poor as we were,
Right.
When she starts to share that via the data, I was like, oh, snap, we need to tell people this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I was like, hey, I was in one of her Facebook posts, and I was like, hey, let's start BBFC. And that was Breaking Brown Family Chicago. Let's start a BBFC chapter and then take it over across the country, and we can start talking to politicians. So I was on that before any of that, before Descendants of Slaves, anything. You know what I'm saying? So it's a long story, man. I could definitely get into it.
Wow.
But yeah, Roz just said.
Well, if you want to do a cast, I know somebody who can moderate it.
Yeah.
If you want to do a cast, I know somebody who can moderate it.
Yeah.
Me, Marlon, me. Don't put me in the casting room. It's me. I want to do it, Marlon.
You need to. I need to.
All right.
I've actually, several people have asked me to do that, and I'm like, I'm gonna do it. I just haven't gotten around to doing it. But we can do it on several platforms.
Absolutely. No, that's a long story because so many people miss that, and that lays the groundwork.
Yeah, it did. I can write a book, man, and I'm not taking no credit from Tony and Yvette. The show about data is what animated me. That's what made me say, "Oh, we need to talk about this." You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I kind of got out of the lane I was in, which was entrepreneurial lane, trying to help Black folk that way, and said, "All right, we need to be in a political space," and that's kind of how I transitioned over to where I'm at now. So I know this, I'm not discrediting what their contribution, but it's a lot more than just that show.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you've said that because I know people lived and died off of 2 podcasts during that time.
Yeah.
And it's so unfortunate that it was so much more than just those casts. There was a lot of content that was shared on those casts. And like I said, we know the foundation of where they got a lot of the information, but people like yourself were never given the proper credit at the time, or had they had you, things would possibly be different.
Oh man, let me tell you, it was incredible. So when I did the whole chapter thing, then I think maybe Ohio came on, and Mark recruited like 500 people in Ohio, and then Chris and them came on, Chris and Friday and them in California, and we started working kind of like in tandem. Like people would call me and say, "Hey, I want to start a chapter. What should I do?" Or they would call Chris. We would go back and forth, and then the assembly got formed. So it was a big, huge thing, man, that happened. And nobody was really ever looking for credit. The only time I really started talking about this is when when they started capping on Twitter. I'm like, okay.
Okay.
Let me release some emails and show y'all. Y'all capping, I'm a cap. But other than that, nobody was looking for credit like that. I wasn't. Chris wasn't. Nobody was. We were just working. But one day we'll tell that story. But to stay on track, that's where I met Gabe. I met Gabe on that journey, and I met Gabe in 2019. Was it 2019, Gabe? Yeah, 2019. And he was actually running for office at that time.
Okay.
And at the time, he was talking about his lane was justice for Black America. That was what he was talking about. And he didn't call it reparations, but that was the sentiment of his message. And he met, I believe it was Linda Jennings and a few other folks, and they were like, "Dude, you're talking about reparations." And he was like, "Well, I guess I am." You know what I'm saying? And so, that was his campaign then. And I met him on that journey, and we became cool and became acquainted there. And fast forward to 2023, I live in the ward he's running in. We both live in the 5th ward.
Okay.
And when the race happened, our current alderman is retiring. And I actually had another friend who I thought was going to run too. So I was kind of sitting on the sidelines and just trying to see what was what. But my other friend ended up not running ultimately. But in that process, I looked at all the candidates' websites. Looked at all their websites. I looked at all, I searched the Facebook pages and stuff like that. Looked at the policy propositions and all that kind of thing. And none of them had anything about, reparations and reparations isn't so critical here because as an alderman, you have a bully pulpit. You know,
Right.
there's not, I guess it depends on your perspective, but from our perspective, you have a bully pulpit as an alderman where you can talk to reparations. But in terms of doing something like on a federal level to help, you know, with the Darity reparations concept, you don't have legislative power like that as an alderman.
Okay.
So reparations, I looked for reparations on their pages, but that wasn't as important for me.
Right.
But they didn't even have anything about Black people. Nothing. It was 11 other candidates, and not one of them had anything about Black folk. And I was like,
how is that possible in Chicago?
I don't know. Chicago is 30% Black. This ward is 58% Black, and most of the Black is freedmen. So I don't understand.
We're going to get into it. We're going to get into it. Let's
we're going to have to, because that's odd.
Good question.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Gabe is excellent at explaining that. He'll do that.
Okay.
But, so it and so that when I saw that, and subsequent to that, Gabe reached out to me and said, "Hey man, you know, I'm wanting to know if you want to help with this campaign. And one of the things I want to do is, if I get elected, I want to open a Freedmen's Bureau in the 5th Ward." I said, well, you ain't got to say nothing else.
Exactly.
You had me at Freedmen Bureau, you know?
Right.
And so I
was about to go Jerry Maguire myself. Like, you had me at Freedmen's Bureau.
That's right. And so I was like, hey man, let's make it happen. So we got together, me and Cynthia, Arthur, and we just started pounding the pavement, putting this thing together. But that's where I met Gabe on that journey, and that's how I got to the point where I'm working with this campaign with him. And as you said a minute ago, it's a genuine. Gabe's a genuine dude, man.
Yeah,
you know,
I've had to watch him, and I've listened to him in Twitter Spaces and whatnot. My thing is, you watch the way a person moves,
right.
You know, and how, I mean, they're not one word answers. He's very descriptive in his answers. He's very thorough, but he never wavers off of his mark. And that's a politician nowadays. You know, they say whatever is need to be said to get that vote. That's not Gabe. He has a platform. He's standing by it. But first and foremost, it's realistic. As you said, he doesn't have the legislative power to really be like reparations. But he knows that there's systemic harms that have happened in Chicago and obviously Ward 5. There's things that he can put together in this Freedmen's Bureau. I think it'll be a great segue to actually start. I really don't want to do what everybody else has done on a conventional level with just going down the bullet points. We might as well start where we are, because we done struck some nerves already by saying Freedmen's Bureau. As a first question to you, Gabe, and Marlon, if you're staying, I need you to stay up and stay mic, because I'm an overtalker, but I want y'all to really cook in here tonight, okay?
Well, I'll cam out, but if y'all want me to pull back in, I'm here. So just let me
Sounds good. Do your thing.
Gabe, yep, I'll be here.
So, Gabe, my thing is, a lot of people are not privy to the information of Freedmen's Bureau, what purpose it was supposed to serve, and how viable it could be in today's world. So can you start with, what is a Freedmen's Bureau and how significant would it be for Ward 5? Because we know on a global scale, when I say global, it's a national, what it can mean for American freedmen. But please explain and just give you a brief synopsis of what the Freedmen's Bureau is, and then why it would be so incredible in Ward 5, and then we'll start cooking from there.
Absolutely. And thank you for giving Marlon an opportunity to present some of that context.
No doubt.
You know, I say that we are living in the river of history right now. You know, I can feel the movement of the planet changing, but starting with the country changing because of the reparations movement. And it's such an honor to be among history makers, people who literally are, you know, gonna be in the history books. And it's so humbling just to have them involved in what we're doing. So the Freedmen's Bureau, another person I have to give Naeem Way, be the power, absolute credit for my education comes from so many people, certainly Dr. Darity, not only his book, but I've had the absolute honor of working on one of his quick guides that he's produced for the book. So these really small, if people haven't seen them, they're these small kind of easy introductions to it. And he brought me into one of those. So I had the opportunity to have conversation, but also have him edit my thinking, which is a tremendous honor because, you know, you think you're understanding how something's working. And then he would say, well, no, it actually looks like this, and this is why. So people have taught me all the way through. And a hallmark of this contemporary reparations movement is the community of educators. And that's why I can speak at all about Freedmen Bureau is, yeah, I knew a little bit, but I was really taught. And I give Naeem, you know, a tremendous amount of credit for that. In addition to Marlon, Arthur Ward has been just an invaluable source of information, as well as a number of other people. So we have emancipation and Reconstruction, and there's an idea for a moment. This is an idea that I believe we have spent extraordinary amounts of resources to bury, that a debt was owed to people who have been enslaved and whose labor had been stolen. And so the country's working on that, and a thing is developed that essentially is, we see iterations of this in other contexts. Farms, at some point, farmers have extensions. Immigrants have things like the Hull House here in Chicago that are basically places they show up and kind of get oriented. They were called settlement houses, and then had other names after that. This was one of the original ideas, like, okay, what we've got to do is create these kind of one-stop shops for these folks, filter resources from the federal government through them, and get and help people get on their feet, because it's our responsibility and really our fault ultimately as a nation that we have all of these people who have absolutely nothing. And within a short period of time, that was that was kind of blown up. It was exploded. And I think, to me, the ultimate illustration is the Freedmen's Bank, is that there was, you know, Black folks took advantage of these resources. They worked to build these institutions to become remarkable things, and then they were destroyed when people saw that. I think that, you know, this is just me speculating. I don't think anybody realized how much resilience and strength was left in the enslaved Black American community. And rather than these people being weak and basically kind of going the way of a lot of indigenous folks, there was a tremendous resilience. And so, for example, millions of dollars, imagine people who literally never had been paid for their labor, and within months, there are huge sums of money being deposited in Freedmen's Bank, and then it's millions of dollars, and then white people will steal it, take the whole thing, and it shuts down, and nothing ever happens to those folks. And that essentially is the story of the Freedmen's Bureau, that all over the country, there's opportunity, but the opportunity is snatched away. And it looks and feels to me just like it is snatched away when it is realized that there was a promise that was going to be fulfilled there. And so that moment of, you know, one of these critical moments of honesty in American history, where white people weren't able to hide behind kind of doublespeak, and it came down to, we cannot let these people have what it looks like they're about to take. So let's just take it away. But, you know, you're talking about absolutely everything. If you can just think about, well, what does somebody need who has nothing? You need resources in terms of a place to live, and in terms of literally a roof over your head, and food and clothing. And all of this is being funneled through Freedmen's Bureaus. So we fast forward. What does that look like in 21st century America, in a city like Chicago, on the south side of Chicago? Well, one of the things that absolutely has to happen is, so some of this is kind of forward thinking, but for me, a lot of this is just facing our past. It actually is retrospective. So this has to be a place that is a magnet, a touch point for the reparations movement in Chicago, meaning the federal reparations movement. Without any question whatsoever, our campaign frames our work in terms of the federal reparations movement as a tool of illumination. To me, being a reparationist is a practice, and it is a practice that brings you an understanding of the way things really are. And then you can take that understanding and you can apply it to things like local politics. And we'll get into some of that in a minute. But my point is to say that what we're not doing, we are not Evanston. Even though Evanston is right, literally just north of Chicago, we're not giving people, I don't know, it looks to me like it's a sandwich and a handshake now that they're doing to about 5 or 6 people and calling it reparations. We believe local reparative justice uses that reparations frame, but it's not reparations. Local, that's my vantage point. I think that a lot of the scholarship at this point agrees. California may be a state that ends up doing something really viable with reparations. My opinion is it's really the exception, not the rule. If it works there, other states are going to be a lot more like Illinois, and we'll talk about that too. But my view generally, we're not doing local reparations. We're just So what we do locally, draw people in with genealogy, free genealogical research, have education in the Bureau. And when I say we, my job is in this whole process to be somebody who's talking about policy, putting our platform out there. When the thing happens, right, if we're successful, I'm over in the Ward office. Marlon's in the Freedmen Bureau. That belongs to Black folks. That's not my business to go in there and say, this should be this way or this should be that way. What I'm talking about now is my understanding of what should happen, not a white man, sitting up saying like, oh, this is what I think these people need. But my understanding of, based on what I have been taught, where we need to meet the need. And so that's what I'm talking about. And if we're successful in the election, we're establishing the Freedmen's Bureau. It will be right next to the Ward office. We're going to literally have a door built between them so people can go back and forth between the two. But it will be an independent advocacy center. And my only job will be to shovel money into that thing. And when Marlon and Arthur and Cynthia McDonald and Linda Jennings say, look, we need this thing taken care of, I take care of that thing, because that's this relationship. That's what we're doing. We're demonstrating that allies can be effective, that we don't have to just be sort of like cheerleaders, but that we can be agentic. We can actually affect change without having to have some kind of a power trip. My vision is that the Freedmen's Bureau, people have bigger salaries than mine. It's a bigger operation than we have, because the most important thing you can do in any city in America is immediately get to work to repair the damage that's been done to Black Americans. I believe that the stumbling block to everything else we want to accomplish, whether you want to talk about healthcare for all, you want to talk about gun control, you want to stop school shootings, whatever it is, first we have to come face to face with our past, and we have to deal with reparations. And when you do that, then everything else starts to be possible. And locally, you can't achieve reparations, but what you can do is be a conduit for that lobby. And you can also model the reparative process, that 5-step iterative process that's recognized through international law, and that Camilla Moore and other people speak so eloquently about. And that's what we're going to do. So the Bureau, I'll give you a quick example of one of the things we'll do through the Bureau. We've got about 169 plots owned by the city, land in the 5th Ward. And if you do research on that land, some of it the city's owned since the 70s, all of it was owned by Black folks when it was taken by the city.
What?
And in the 70s, they started taking land on the South Lakefront. Remember, we're on the lake. This is real prime real estate. It was all Black owned. And because this is when, once you get into the 70s, so in the 50s and 60s, there's the transition. It was a white community, and then it was a mixed community. And we all know how this story goes. It was after the civil unrest following the assassinations in the 60s and into the 70s, as people were really, working on the streets actively to insist on change and to mobilize, they started taking houses. And so in the 70s, it was around civil unrest. In the late 70s, into the 80s, into the early 90s, they made it part of the war on drugs. So the city of Chicago would identify, and there was no process. The city would just point at a house and say, drug house, and they would take it. Every single piece of, every building that they would take through this method would be torn down. So they would destroy that Black-owned asset. They would take it away, destroy it, and then they would just have vacant land. We have 169 of these lots. That's the story in easily 80% of these lots. We're giving back 70 of them. We've identified 70 of those plots of land that we don't have. There are potential conflicts. There's a commitment around affordable housing with some of the lots. Other lots are really not usable. Like there's one adjacent to a fire department, for example, that's very thin. But just a basic buildable lot, we've identified 70 that we're going to move through the Freedmen's Bureau. Why the Freedmen's Bureau? because we're only giving them to freedmen. So what you've got to do in order to be a part of this process, you've got to go into the Bureau, you've got to partner with our free genealogical service. And then once you've identified two things, longstanding presence in the community. So we don't want people just showing up for a free piece of land, flipping
Absolutely.
it, moving on. So we want you to be able to say, and this is, again, a large number of people will be able to say, here's my mom, here's my uncle, there's like deep roots here. So we're recognizing and responding to that. And we're just giving that land. Even if we think we're going to use that land to build for some of the other plans that we have, that's not our business. It shouldn't be the city's business to own property to then trade it to an outsider, which is what happens. They take a bunch of land, and then a developer will come in. They'll say, we're getting ready to improve your neighborhood. Lucky you. They'll give away that land that belonged to Black folks. They'll build something using construction workers that are white and Latino. And we're seeing that right now with the Obama Center, which we'll talk about later. It doesn't matter what the project is. Black people do not get these jobs. Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but one major one is it's all union work. And so we know how the unions, the representation of Black folks in the unions. That's another whole conversation to have. But this is the process, right? So they build, and then they put this thing up. They fill it with folks. If it's residential, folks from outside the community. If it's commercial, they get, if it's a restaurant, it's a chain restaurant. It's nothing local, and it's all competing against stuff that is local. So you're driving local folks out of business. You're driving up property values without giving people an opportunity to manage the property taxes that come along with that. The whole thing, it's always extractive. So what we say is, you start from the beginning. The way you break that cycle is it's a whole process that we're going to kind of seal off that chain of extraction. But we begin with local folks need to have these lots before anything happens next. So even if the city says, look, we want to build condos here, then we say, bet, talk to him, talk to Mr. Jones, because that's his now. And he wants market rate. Forget this giving it to this developer for $1. You need to give him a couple $100,000 because that's the market rate. So when things happen like the Obama Center is triggering all of this speculative housing market activity. And so for most folks, because we're 75% renter in the ward, there's no advantage. You're just watching a game played in front of you. Well, if I can get 70 families to have a plot of land, there's a vacant lot literally up the street from me on the market for $350,000 because of the market instability the Obama Center's causing. Now, there's a lot that we can do to stabilize that market, but in the meantime, let's start to get the game, on a more level playing field. And so that's the thinking. And I'm sorry to kind of over-explain that, but the idea is to give you the spirit of the Bureau. It's a lot of stuff. Definitely, there are things that will be directed by, the folks who I'm already working with. When I talk about that group of like 4 or 5 people, these are kind of the chief advisors and managers and the people who are helping direct and develop the policy. But we have an army. We have 20, 30 people who, when we say we need people on the streets, we need people to make calls, we got 20 people who are, phone banking right now. And about half of those people are in the city. Actually, we've got people all over the country helping us too. But in the city, we have those people. So when we activate this, there's a whole group of freedmen who are going to say, this is how this is going to work. And that's going to be part of the iterative process too, is developing the way it works, which is how it should have been from the beginning. That's probably the main difference when you think about the Bureau back in the day when it was first established and this sort of thing. Two big differences. We're starting as a private entity because you cannot trust city government. I'm not sure you can trust government, but I know you can't trust the city of Chicago to help Black folks. And so that's one. And then two is what the specifics of what it's going to do is going to be largely member driven. So forgive me for running my mouth that much, but I just wanted to,
look, on this level, we're very ignorant. At least the people that I deal with are very ignorant to something like this. We don't talk about the Freedmen's Bureau around Washtenaw County. In our social circles, we may have conversations about what it was like and what it could mean, but to have that broken down that way, I needed that. I needed you to be able to lay the groundwork.
Thank you.
Because if anybody's going to talk about it across the country, you've got to start there. You've got to start at the beginning of why it was necessary then, how it was stolen away, and how it could be viable. Without that, if you under-explain it, then it sounds like you came off half-cocked and no,
Exactly.
that'll never work. So I get what
Right.
you're saying. Now, here's my question. Say the Freedmen's Bureau, because I'm all about access to resources. So
Yes.
Freedmen-owned businesses, say I've got a Freedmen-owned law firm, a Freedmen-owned doctor's office, dentist office, things like that. We know that we generally cannot build substantive conglomerates because we don't have that capital. Having
Right.
access to capital to those types of people, doctors, lawyers, skilled tradesmen, not always having to be a mom and pop. We need them to be able to compete, because we just heard about construction. These contract jobs that companies get, it's because they've already got everything, locked and loaded. And when they're ready to bid out jobs, they know they don't have to go rent equipment. They ain't got to run up to Lowe's and Home Depot to get equipment to get on this job. They've got the stuff in their yard.
Right.
Whereas a lot of Black construction companies don't have all the resources and things like that. Through the Freedmen's Bureau, would that allow them to gain easier access to resources to be able to build those current businesses up, as well as people that would be wanting to come into skilled tradesmen? I mean, if I'm a plumber, I'm a journeyman, something like that, maybe I want to go off on my own, but the affordability and the risk is what you have a lot of times, and it scares people back into just collecting that check from their employer, which there's nothing wrong with that. But why get a slice of the pie when you can actually have the whole pie? Would that give people that with the Freedmen's Bureau?
Yeah, and so this is great. I really appreciate you going in exactly this direction, because this is where the vision starts to become. So we're going to get into some nuance, but we're also going to get into some practicality, so people can start to think about our vision in the campaign and in all of these particulars is to create a model that's replicable everywhere. So I'm going to talk about credit unions as we're talking about this other stuff.
Boy, you get on my phone, Gabe. This is literally, because I was like, tell me about this banking arm of the Freedmen. I literally had that ready. I got a mirror in here. He just went straight up into my next question. Go ahead, brother. Go ahead. You want it.
Because I can feel you. I see how your mind is working, and we're in sync.
Sir.
You have to create an ink. So I'll step back for a second and say, every Black community in America is ruptured economically. And the reason they're ruptured economically is because that ruptures you politically. If you can't get the money together, you can't really do the politics in the way that America does politics, because America is a government and a commercial enterprise infused together. There's no difference between those two things in this country. So we are about micro-institutional development. That's what we're doing here. The Freedmen Bureau has this important character, heritage, context. It also is an institution. And our main street in this particular part of the ward that we envision, the south end of the ward, south of 65th Street, 65th to 74th, for those of you who know the area, they've tore up 71st Street, and they've done it intentionally. They wiped out every important institution. There's no health care. There's no good banking. There are now what do you call it when it's like a outlet? You can get, like, there's a Chase Bank, but it's not, they're not going to give you the substantive help that you need. There was a bank offering help to folks with more limited means, more kind of reflecting the needs of the community, and it was literally put out of business. Banks are designed to not help Black folks. Banks are designed to not help anybody who is under a certain economic threshold, but they are especially designed, they are uniquely designed to prevent Black communities from flourishing. That's a whole conversation, but what we can just say is they are prohibited by regulatory bodies from loaning under a certain amount of capital and above a certain risk threshold. That is essentially the demographic that this country has created for most Black folks. So banks are designed to not help Black people. And
I used to say that banks are in business to keep us out of business, and people didn't understand what that meant. But
you're exactly right.
You just said it.
You need, so what you need is community development credit unions, because there is a specific kind of credit union that is chartered to help everybody. So they actually have the opposite, and banks are constantly trying to put credit unions out of business. There's a lobby. This is all they do all the time. But credit unions happen to also be a convenient structure for unions. There's lots of membership organizations that like what credit unions can do. So it just works out that there's a kind of a sweet spot where they can exist. And so they happen to be able to help Black folks. So what we do, this is what we do. We establish a set of institutions on the street, and their relationship to each other begins to do what you're envisioning. So what we're picturing is I'm the founding organizer of a credit union. That's why I talk a lot about it. I'm a co-organizer. I don't take credit for it. I'm part of a team that 23 years ago saw what was coming, and we knew that things were going to get a lot worse. We saw that about 5-6 years before 2008. The South Side was already going through 2008 and 2002. And so we saw what was coming, and we knew that if there was an opportunity for some people to have access to capital on a micro level, it might, reduce some of the pain. 20 years later, that thing has $4 million in assets. It's about, I want to say, the only branch we have is, I want to say, about 6-7 miles away. Bringing a branch to 71st Street. So Freedmen's Bureau, credit union, health center. We don't have there's no health clinic of sort of a typical, what you imagine to be what everyone needs. There isn't one anywhere in this part of the community. On the north end of the ward, there's a nice, big, shiny hospital attached to the University of Chicago, which for your folks in your neck of the woods is our U of M. It's basically, doing all the same stuff that they're doing in Hyde Park is our Ann Arbor. They're actually remarkably, it's a little frightening. I lived in Ann Arbor for a short time. The similarities are a little chilling. So
is it this way across the country? Because Boulder, Colorado, and the Colorado, all that stuff, those college towns with the medical
Harvard,
centers.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, so
and
that was all slave labor. Just letting people know this is all slave labor. These places were built by slave labor.
Yeah. University of Chicago, the seed money was from a slave, somebody who owned a bunch of slaves. So it is literally the blood and bones of enslaved Black American citizens that created the foundation of this university, which now has a monopoly on healthcare and doesn't provide it to the south end of the ward that it sits in. So we're going to build a health center. I've been working with a really great health provider in the neighborhood to our west on an expansion project, and we've had conversations, and they're down for it. And so we've got our credit union, we've got our health center. The numbers are something like this: 64 jobs, $4.57 million in annual salary on the street once we start getting all of this going. Now, all of that requires, it takes time. None of that's going to happen overnight. So we're not promising anything magical. But that's the point. Everything we're doing is actual. This is the work. And so the work creates the opportunity. We really want to make one of these. There are a couple of kind of satellite institutions that essentially are one that's really focused on women's needs and one that's really focused on men's needs. To make it just very, very simple. And we're really interested in one of those being built from the ground up so that it's a construction project that brings in all of this 100%, as much as we can do, it's private capital, and all of this is local. We are not, this is our vision. And now we're going to go to the city and see what we can do. This is our vision. And I'm talking about a health center. I've seen their financials. They can get this done. Now, they'll want some subsidies from the city and whatnot, but we can negotiate the terms of what they're doing in such a way that we say, your staff is going to be local, or we're not playing ball with you. And they have the capacity, because their funding starts with the federal government. So they're not going to, when they go to the city, they're going to go with a bundle of cash, and they're going to have the alderman right next to them saying yes. And as many people from the community as we need to show up at meetings to say yes. And so we're getting that in there, and that alone is going to have, at least a couple doctors making $200,000 a year, as well as the people making $35,000 a year and everything in between. The tellers at the credit union making a similar kind of salary. We've got the salaries worked out, and this isn't back of the envelope. We've done an analysis of what these institutions will look like and the revenue they can bring in. That begins to rebuild the Main Street. So what you're describing we need to, as we're doing the discrete sort of economics, which is who that works in this particular institution is going to make how much money, we also have to think about what about the parallel jobs and employment and opportunity. So you're going to have to build out, even if you're working in a regular building that's already there. If you're doing new construction, obviously you're going to need contractors. All of this is all a front end conversation, and it's literally who here is doing construction work already in the community,
Right.
and what do you need to get to the capacity that we've got. We're going to build a $20 million building for this women's health and wellness center. What do you need to get to the point that you can be the lead contractor on that? And we're going to walk side by side till that happens. We're going to say somebody needs, we're not going to nickel dime security. If all these places need security, we're going to figure out somebody's going to have a contract that's going to really get them into a place where they have assets. We're not going to make a whole bunch of people do minimum wage security jobs here and there or contract in from the outside. We're going to build a viable business if it's not already there. And if it is there, we're going to make it better. Cleaning, same thing. And we're going to think about, okay, let's say, I'm saying our analysis gives us 64 core jobs in these 5 institutions. We start to talk about these other people coming in to do security, to clean and whatnot. What kind of additional resources do we need on the street? What kind of places to eat, to shop, other elements like that? All of it front end, because this is really how planning should be happening. It doesn't happen that way because the point in the Black community is to extract wealth.
Right.
And it's that simple. People need to get away from the idea that government in any way, shape, or form is helping Black communities. It is not. It never does. It never will. You've got to have a strategy that begins and ends with what the people are doing. And this is why I say, so our hashtag is Freedmen First. And Freedmen First isn't just like, oh, Black people are going to like this, what's catchy. It is literally, you cannot solve problems in a Black community unless you say Black Americans are at the center. Everything we do has to make sure that these are the people that we're taking care of. Because the game in America is, as long as you keep Black folks down, you can kind of play everyone else too. You got all these white people who are in misery, but they turn on Fox News and they see some racist stuff about Black folks and they feel good about themselves.
They're like, at least I'm not Black. At least I'm not Black. I mean,
exactly.
That's the crazy thing that people don't understand about reparations. And we're talking about on a national level, a full schedule of reparations evens the playing field. And it will take away that moniker, because as bad as it can get for white folks out here, as bad as it can get for any ethnicity out here, they can always look back and be like, at least I ain't Black. Because we're the people that get the least amount of resources across this country, even people that aren't even supposed to be here. And that's what I consider an illegal. When you hear me talk about people that ain't supposed to be here, I'm talking about people that ain't got their paperwork right. They snuck into the country, fled from another, snuck into this country, and they're getting resources out of America's ass. This is my problem today. I live in a sanctuary territory, and I see people that have illegally dropped into my area, and they're living better than people whose families have been in this territory over 200 years. That's nuts to me. And the government is perpetuating this madness. I don't blame anybody for fleeing an area that they couldn't cut it in, and life got too hard. They came over here for a better life. My thing is, just get your paperwork right, bro. Don't steal resources from somebody who is rightfully here. But they don't even have to steal no more. The government is trying to funnel them in. I mean, and we're going to talk a little bit about non-citizens voting, because I know that they're trying this everywhere. I don't know if they've tried it in Chicago yet, but they're trying it everywhere. And it's just ludicrous to me, Gabe. How can you let somebody who didn't even have the loyalty to their own country to stay, they come here, they're not an American citizen here, have been nationalized or whatever, and you're going to give them a voter registration card? Really?
We've got to have that conversation, because it is on the minds of everybody, and we've got situations here that it's a real problem. Now, I'll also say sanctuary cities. I don't know in other kinds of areas, but in the cities, mayors do that, establish them. So in Chicago, the mayor has declared it a sanctuary city. There's little regulatory control over it so you've got to think about, so what do you do as a city council member to mitigate what happens. And we can get into that now or later. I just want to really say the economics right away for anyone who's listening. And your community is, struggling. First of all, Freedmen's Bureau, that's not my idea. That's for sure.
Right.
I did say to Marlon, this is what I want to do. But literally, I was in Atlanta in the fall when there was the coming together of reparationists that was convened by the folks in California. And so Naeem did a presentation on just the idea of freedmen, the term, the history, its importance, why you want to identify as freedmen when you're trying to do things like be a protected class, have policy made, and so forth. It was like the illumination that I got from that is where we got this certainty that the Bureau is needed, because you need a Freedmen's Bureau. So the first thing is get yourself a Freedmen's Bureau, because get you something that's a stake in the ground that nobody can play with. You don't want that to be NAACP, because you see what they're doing. The legacy organizations that were supposed to be advocacy organizations are now not doing that. And I think part of it is that they play with, who's black?
Right.
Who's Freedmen is literally written in almost like stone. There's very little in America that is, legally binding, and the Freedmen identity is so binding. I just found this out recently. This is very interesting to me. So the blood quantum that's used to identify whether indigenous people, Native Americans, are really Native Americans from certain tribes, they lose that blood quantum over time. So if you intermarry with another tribe, your kids are a fraction of that tribe. Eventually, if they get below a certain percentage, they're gone. You know who that doesn't happen to? Freedmen. So if your ancestors were a freedman associated with the tribe, that identity in perpetuity goes to your descendants. So you're Choctaw forever. You're a Choctaw freedman, or whatever. And to me, that represents the enduring power of the idea of freedmen. Put that stake in the ground. 1, 2, get a credit union. And it is specifically get a credit union. Get a financial institution that you can control, because these are financial cooperatives. You get a share when you open an account, and they are member controlled. So you do that. You draw a boundary in the black. So we talk about the Fifth Ward. Fifth Ward is 58% black. From 1980 to today, there were 75,000 black folks in South Shore, which is the neighborhood that makes up the south end. We're not the whole part. We're a big part of South Shore, but not all of it. But for purposes
how many people are in the Fifth Ward? I just want to get some math going in my head. How many?
So there are 50,000 people in the Fifth Ward. The north end of the ward has more of that than the south end of the ward, but the south end of the ward is about 95% black, and it's I'd say maybe 3% black immigrant, so it's like 92%. It's
wow, that's territory. Staggering, dude.
Now dig this. That neighborhood, South Shore, that's the anchor of that that Freedmen enclave, had 75,000 people in it, 75,000 freedmen basically in it in 1980, and it has less than 50,000 now.
Wow.
We have the highest eviction rates in South Shore in the city, the highest foreclosure rates in the city. There's an assault on the neighborhood. And, for people who struggle with like, yeah, but do I really want to deal with, a white man kind of working with this? Of course, Marlon talked a little bit about that, because we really are honestly a team. But the other thing is, whoever's going to address this honestly and directly, that they are depopulating this. I mean, the South Side generally is being depopulated. They're getting ready to have a whole different group of people in it. And as a strategy to stop that, that's who you need. So what you've got to do is say, this is the Freedmen community. This is our bureau. This is our geography. Here's our credit union. And credit unions are geographically bound. So you can literally say, you got to live here to get help here. And that's critically important, because what you're doing is saying we are not a movable concept, not in terms of our identity, because we're lineal. We're not racial. This isn't a racial thing. It's a lineal thing. This is where we live. Here's our geography. Marlon and I have talked about pillars on every block telling the history of freedmen. Not only we think of sort of traditionally what that means, but literally up until and pretty thoroughly into the reparations movement. So the names of the people who are contemporaries now, you're walking down the street and it's a pillar. I picture it as a concrete pillar with like a metal plate with that raised lettering. But the point is permanence. The point is a stake in the ground. When we talk about the Freedmen's Bureau and the Ward Office, which are going to be in a building, Marlon and I have kind of picked one out we like, and we've started talking to we're counting our chickens. But we're going to have, I mean, when you talk about flying your flag, you know what flag's going to be on the top of that building. And that's what people have to do. So to me, what I think is so important for any place in the country where you've got these challenges, to recognize that there's a set of strategies that we can use, and that is they're replicable, and we're about getting this done here, and then sharing the wealth, sharing the the capacity wherever we can. Because I'll tell you what, the movement has been so good to us. We've had so many invitations on these shows. I did an analysis tonight because I've got a radio show in the morning. We've had 47 donations from about a dozen and change states across the country.
Beautiful.
And that's almost all folks from the movement.
That's what I want people to understand. And I know my banner is going across the bottom. I've not gotten to that point where I ask for money on my streams and I say, hit that Cash App, do this, do that, just because I haven't felt like I've had all my stuff together. And I'm just now getting to that point where I'm going to start seeking contributions to Freedmen Media so I can move situations like yourself. As we move forward here, I want to make sure anybody that has heard of Gabe, has not donated to his campaign, please go to gabefor5.com. Slide down a taste, you'll see the red donate button. Hit that. I believe there's a $10, $50, $100 increment, or you can do a customized donation. Please donate to this brother's campaign for Election Day. It is essential why we need that help on Election Day, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But we spent damn near an hour talking about the Freedmen's Bureau. So that's literally groundwork. That's groundwork gold. Yes. Here for me and my listeners and people that'll catch the playback. But what I want to segue to the multi-phase investment plan, because now that we've got the Freedmen's Bureau in our mindset, you have a multi-phase investment plan that I'm sure includes all of that, but there's obviously something else, because even though we're 58% freedmen in the ward, we're 42% that's not. So this plan has to work for all people. And everybody knows me. I'm not all lives matter. I'm going to speak freedmen first because I've never been anything but a freedman. But I'm a realist as well. That's why, once again, having someone like yourself on the cast, it means more to me than just saying, okay, I don't always have to just talk to Black politicians, but I look at the politicians that are in power. The most powerful politician on the Democratic side is Jim Clyburn, and he does absolutely nothing for American Freedmen. That's right. Well, she used to be Black, and then she became the most powerful Asian, in the world, which was Kamala Harris. We see what she's done for Black people. We had a president who was supposed to be Black. He's out of your town. You're gonna take this L tonight, Gabe. And I don't say much about him anymore because I just get angry at the way he's treated us as a collective. But everybody that looks like me did me right. So I'm not saying I'm jumping ship and saying, I'm only going to listen to white politicians, but I'm going to listen to and work with people who are advocating for us. No longer am I just with you because we look alike. I got to be with you because you with me, you trying to help me move my needle. So you come along with this type of plan, and there's other politicians that they're going to have to jump on board, because not only what you're doing is right, but it makes sense because it can be fruitful in their communities as well. You haven't said anything here tonight that doesn't make sense. So with this multi-phase investment plan for the South Shore, please break that down and how that's going to look. And I need to take those nuggets from it, because we have areas in our community that have obviously been taken away or they're laid dormant now. We've got to start speaking this into an existence to where we've got to have we just can't be barbershops. We just can't be barbecue restaurants. We just can't be, a little hip hop clothing shop. And all due respect to those businesses that have been in my community for years and years and years, we've got to be into manufacturing. We've got to be into so much more. And the only way we really get to that is get into multi-phase investment plan strategies. So please break that down for the Fifth Ward and really how it truly could look in anybody's community.
You just did a tremendous job of providing the context that I usually have to, and I'm going to steal some of that, have to use to kind of explain why this is so important. I mean, what you're really describing is the supply chain. So for a very long time, what we've done in communities, because we think that like, well, surely everyone can't be conspiring against my neighborhood. So I'm just going to open up this little shop. Everyone is conspiring against you, because if you open that same little shop somewhere else, everything is different, because you've got, in a white community, you've got more affluence. So there's more disposable wealth. People will just be like, oh, she's my friend, I'm going to spend $1,000 in her little boutique. And, we'll see what happens. And the proprietor is like, my dad used to say the rule of thumb was you got to have 3 years worth of capital if you're trying to open a retail business, because you just don't know what's going to happen. Well, if you can have 3 years worth of capital, that's a great idea. I'm sure everybody would like to have 3 years worth of capital. But when you've never had, when the assets that your family should have never materialized, that's not an option for you. So there are two important elements to this, and I'm going to try to lay it out more concisely, and then we can dig as much as you want to dig, so that I'm not do another hour on this.
I got you.
Although I could do this, you could see I could do this all night. But there are two elements, and this can work again in any community. First, you've got to close the loop on development. So I described earlier the scenario where the city orchestrates something where a developer from the outside comes in and does all this work. Well, the key element of that is that there is a corporation that's calling the shots in that whole process. There's a developer that's putting the other pieces together. There is now a kind of corporation. Corporations, like banks, are designed to hurt you. They're chartered. They are chartered to hurt you. So they are, because of the peculiar construction of America, and because corporations are designed to be profit driven and to only serve profit, they are designed to harm communities that do not have the resources to facilitate that profit making. Black folks. So corporations are designed to hurt Black communities. B corporations are a relatively new development, and B corporations allow for corporations to exist that can still, same structure. You're answering to the shareholders. Your CEO has to do what the bylaws and what the articles that incorporate that organization say, but it can be for benefit. It doesn't have to be for profit. And what you can also do with a B, and this is a little bit of innovation, what you can also do with a B Corp is geographically, and geography, I'm going to come back to it over and over again, define what it should do. So here's the scenario. You've got a B corporation and we'll stick with South Shore for now. It's actually a little more kind of complicated in the word, but this is for purpose of illustration. Every resident of South Shore is a shareholder, period, exclusively. No one else gets shares. You distribute shares all over South Shore for a B corporation, the South Shore Development Corporation. If you are a freedman, you get 10 times the shares of anyone else in the ward, in let's say in this part of the ward, the South Shore neighborhood. And I mean everyone. You have an infant, so everyone's getting 100 shares, no matter who you are. They go out in the mail to everyone. Congratulations, you've got proof of residency. Here's your 100 shares for the South Shore Development Corporation. You got 6 freedmen in your family. Here's 6,000 shares, because that's how this has to work. Because you've got to give shares are power. And so what we're doing now is any development, any major development that's going to happen in the geography that we're talking about is going to go through this development corporation. This is the one the alderman wants. Now, this part in Chicago, this is a lot easier because basically every ward is controlled entirely by the alderman. So if we say this is the company we like, that's the company that's going to get the contract. You still have to go through the fair bidding and all this stuff, but in point of fact, that's at the end of the day, all the aldermen kind of defer to each other, and so we all kind of end up kind of running the show. So you'd have to approach that piece of it differently. But the general idea is that you create a corporation that's whole purpose is to control development on the private side, and also whatever profit it generates it has two purposes: one, to reinvest in the community, and two, to provide assets and build value for every single family. So it's no longer the case that somebody says, I'm going to build a movie theater for you guys, and it's going to benefit you because you'll get to go to the show. Now it's, okay, you built this movie theater. We made you hire only local. Everything that you did in there went through in the supply chain, a local distributor, a local buyer, whatever. And now this thing's making some good money. We're glad to hear it because we're getting a piece of that. Because our development corporation is a co-owner in this thing that you just built. It's the only way. And another piece of that is if somebody is trying to, whether it's the alderman or a developer in the process is trying to kind of bend or break the rules, you're owners. It's not about wait till the next election, vote someone out. It's not about write a letter to the local newspaper. It's you're fired. We're the majority shareholder in this scenario, and you're a minor partner. You're the junior partner, and we see that you're hiring these people from the other side of the city. You're gone. We're not even giving you a second chance, or however it's going to happen. But you understand the illustration.
Absolutely.
Now the other piece of this is we've got a way of working through the supply chain to activate storefronts. We got a bunch of vacant storefronts, and we know how that works. The main street is owned by, once entirely owned locally and Black owned, is almost entirely now owned certainly out of city, much of it out of state. And so this is a whole nother problem. But we've got a strategy that's going to activate those for minimum cost for the people who are doing it, so there's not an asset challenge there. I can get a little bit more into that. But what I want to now do is paint the picture of the 5 institutions, the 64 jobs, the $4.57 million flowing every year in the community, buying clothes, buying sandwiches, taking an Uber, whatever you're doing. Now you've added on some activated storefronts. Now you've got some major projects going on, and the corporation that's developing it, that's making it all happen, is also local. And the entire economic scenario is sealed. None of it is, okay, well, we've got a whole bunch of people from this other ethnic group that own our corner stores. We don't know how that ended up happening, but that's how it is now. No, we say we're buying up those corner stores. And now it's the corporation that has the corner stores. And, it's one thing to say to people, why don't you buy? And every ethnicity says this, just buy with our group, buy among Middle Eastern people, buy Black, buy this. When it's literally your store, you're going to buy in that store. That's right. The motivation that's different. So yeah, maybe I can get a deal down at the Walmart, but what I'm not going to get is a dividend. And so if I go to the corner store, and that's one of 4 corner stores owned by the corporation, then basically you got the situation handled. So that's in a nutshell. This is much deeper than that. I will talk to Freedmen, and let me be clear. I'm not a developer. I'm not interested in doing this for everybody everywhere. This is the movement. This is reparations. I've been educated. I am being funded right now. People are on the phone for me, for our campaign right now. I'm giving back. This is knowledge. I'm returning the favor that I'm in debt. And I will talk to anyone in the country about this in as much detail as they want, if they think this is something that they can get going. And Marlon and I, when we get to the other side of this thing, whether it's, on February 28th, or there's going to be a runoff, if we're successful on April 4th, whatever happens, we're going to have a writing period and a recording period where we're going to do a data dump, and we're going to get this stuff such that everybody is going to be able to benefit from it if you're Freedmen. Now, we're trying to figure out how we're going to make that part work, but it's essential, because what we can't do is make this I'm not being generous right now. I could be generous with other things in other contexts. Bana Bang is asking about my Cash App. It's just Gabriel
Yes.
Piemonte, $ Gabriel Piemonte. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
I'm going to put that in there and just put it in the chat right now.
It's just my name, Gabriel
Okay.
Piemonte, with the $ in front of it, of course. That's the economic scenario, and you can do that. We can seal it off. We've been convinced that we need outside help. So the truth is, if you think about how these companies keep coming in to Black communities and extracting wealth, you stop for a second and you think, man, there's always more wealth. And then go back to the Freedmen's Bank we were talking about. Folks who had nothing, literally everything was taken from them, within a very short span of time have millions of dollars that they had saved. Black folks create wealth. It is why we have the country we have. It's the value of the country. The foundation of the wealth of this country is stolen labor. And so we know that there's wealth. All we have to do, so people want to convince us resources have to come in. That's the only way you're going to have success in the Black community. Mm-hmm. But consistently, historically, that does not benefit the Black community. What we're positing, what Arthur and Marlon and Cynthia and Linda and myself and other thinkers who have, been out in the broader reparations community, we're taking all that knowledge, and the hypothesis is, if you draw a ring around a community and give it the opportunity to let that value circulate, that's going to be the wealth, and it's going to explode. I believe it's going to explode. And once you do that, our goal is to surpass the 75,000 freedmen that were there in 1980. We want, standing room only in the 5th Ward. And we want it to be, it's 58% freedmen right now. We want 80%. We want it to be the place that everyone wants to live, because there are no slumlords, because people know when you start to mistreat tenants, we're on you. There's no waiting around. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, because we're serious about the local business. It's not about politics and, let this guy kind of get away with a little something and you're going to get a donation, or I got to play ball with these guys because they were the ones who brung me. Who brung me was Freedmen.
Right.
How I'm getting here, we succeed. And this is, Freedmen did this.
Right.
I got a Freedmen campaign manager, my chief advisor, Arthur Ward, Freedmen. Linda Jennings, who got me here in the first place, Freedmen. We got Freedmen all over the country donating and making phone calls. So we're literally in debt to Freedmen. And that's who we're going to pay back. We're not going to pay back some out-of-state landlord who's trying to flip a building or sit on it until the Obama Center opens. That's not what we're in the business of doing. And we're going to be as transparent as possible so everyone can see it happen and we can replicate this.
Well, I mean, and that's a good turn for you to either grab something if you got something to drink right there, or we are in here with Gabriel Piemonte, who is running for alderman in the 5th Ward in Chicago, Illinois, and Brother Marlon Watson is his campaign manager. He's already spoke on Brother Arthur, Sister Cynthia, Sister Linda. There's so many different things that I want to ask you, but as I told you, I really didn't want to be conventional. I know you have answered all these different questions the same way or tried to answer them different ways so it sounds fresh. I get it. What I want to do is I want to dig into some of the history of American Freedmen, because I don't know how many of my cast that you've actually watched, but what I like to do is I like to pull audio and or video from our history. And one of the things that has hurt us is the ongoing businesses around us. I've got a cast that I just haven't been able to run off because things just keep hitting me and keep hitting me and keep hitting me. But I've got basically 15 companies that have benefited from not only chattel slavery, but they still are making money out here today, Gabe. And they're directly affecting us because what they did to us during slave times, they don't give any of that back. And I'm talking about bringing us on, whether it be for employment all the way up to Brooks Brothers, where I think every American freedman who graduates from high school should be able to go to Brooks Brothers and get a free suit. I mean, that could be on the minimum end,
Yes.
but I've got
Yes.
literally different companies that have benefited off of American freedmen since the early 1800s. And the reason I chose this today was because we've been having an issue. We've been having an issue with Norfolk Southern.
Oh,
And
excellent.
I've got a problem with Norfolk Southern from another level. Not only are they just running trains into each other and derailing and this, that, and the other, and we obviously know about the mistreatment of railroad workers of today, but I don't believe people really understand the history of railroad workers of yesterday. And where I have a problem with what they're doing with Norfolk Southern in Ohio and right here in my backyard in Van Buren, Michigan, repetitive derailments, and not anybody from Washington, D.C. has been up to Michigan, but Joe Biden flew his monkey ass over to Ukraine over the weekend on a creep tip. They said they snuck him over there and then dropped a $500 million check on Zelensky. See, my thing is, if you just gonna say you hate us so we can go find somebody else to vote for. But Biden keeps coming for American freedmen's vote, just like every other Democrat, but don't want to do nothing for us. This is where we start to say no. We start to stop and look exactly what they're doing to us. Now they're actually just trying to vote us out and bring in other bodies to fill our voting base shoes. You know, it's just so disrespectful. But one of the companies that has benefited since the early 1800s, about 1808, from what I know, Norfolk Southern played an integral part of American chattel slavery. And where they are right now, with all of these derailments and things like that, I believe there's going to be a ton of stuff that's going to come out, that some of these derailments has been probably dealing with workers who were not maybe at the wheel, that they were, hey, there's literally been stories about some of these railroad workers being asleep at the wheel. They're sick on these trains. They don't get proper time off. Sometimes they get sick and get better, and they've never been able to get off the train because of the railroad schedule and the lack of manpower. We obviously know COVID decimated a lot of things. Well, it took a lot of railroad workers out of the paint. So where you might have been working for 12 days, now you're working for 24. Where you might have been working for 24 days, now you're working for 48. And these are people with families. These are people with families. These are people with lives, and they never get off these trains, and they're literally dying on these trains. So Norfolk Southern has had such an issue recently. I decided to go back because, like I said, I had this stuff ready to run a stream maybe a month and a half ago. And I know you're up on Dr. Darity, and I know you're up on From Here to Equality. But what I like to do is I like to go, I'm probably about my fourth time going through this book. I like to get into some of the audio where they talked about the treatment of railroad workers and how integral of a part American freedmen, or we were enslaved at that time, played in the building of the railroad. Then I want to go to and show you some data about Norfolk Southern, how and well, really what they owe us. Because when we talk about state initiatives, local initiatives, that's not the national debt. See, I know Norfolk Southern can't pay reparations to American freedmen and have that be it. But they're one of the companies who benefited off of chattel slavery, so they owe us too. And I want to talk about what they would owe us each. I'm talking each American freedman in just a minute after looking at this, and really hear your view first after you hear the audio, and then when I put the stats up, how viable this could be for us, and have that money be able to be used in the Freedmen's Bureau. We'll talk more about that. I don't want to put too much on you before, but please check this audio out, y'all. This audio is from Here to Equality, and it was the chapter of who benefited most off of slavery. So let me get into it here real quick, and then That'll give Brother Gabe a chance to catch his breath. I haven't said much. I ain't never had nobody on here, Gabe, to talk more than I do. So I'm feeling good about myself tonight. I'm feeling good about myself tonight. So let me get this right. And then we're going to check this audio out. Okay, I think I'm good there. And then we're going to go.
Enslaved blacks played a critical role in building the American railway system, whether they were the direct human property of the railroad companies or hired, rented from their owners. Theodore Cornweibel Jr. reports, in 1859, 1/3 of all Southern lines employed 100 or more slaves, ranging from 1,200 at work building the Atlantic and Gulf Railroad in Georgia to 500 building the Vicksburg, Shreveport, and Texas Railroad, to 400 or more toiling on 7 other lines. In contrast, by 1859, no single plantation was home to as many as 1,200 slaves, and 400 bondsmen were to be found on only a very few large estates. Perhaps the largest single concentration of enslaved railroaders was the 1,493 men and 425 boys at work constructing the North Carolina Railroad in 1852. Whether for construction and maintenance or sometimes operations, Southern railroads could not do without enslaved black labor. Sometimes owners actually were reluctant to hire out their enslaved laborers because of the extreme danger associated with rail construction and train operations. If they did so, they often would take out insurance policies on their property, or they would structure contracts that precluded their property from working on the riskiest tasks. Of course, those contractual provisions were not always obeyed, leading contractors and slave owners to the courtroom. Racial stratification operated in the rail system, with enslaved blacks and subsequently emancipated blacks assigned the most dangerous work. Prior to the widespread adoption of air brakes and automatic couplers early in the 20th century, one of the riskiest assignments was the role of brakeman. Many railroads used slaves for this hazardous position, the lowest ranking on the train. Their main tasks were helping to stop the train and coupling and uncoupling cars.
Okay, I'm going to stop that real quick right there. Just to bring us up real quick, Gabe. They used us to stop the train, Gabe. Uh-oh, my audio, my fault. They used us to stop the train. I mean, so it's going to go a little bit deeper. We still got about $1.41 to just cook on this. You know how dangerous it is to stop a bicycle. You know how dangerous it is to stop a motorcycle. You can't stop a car.
Right.
We're talking about a locomotive, and he's going to really actually break it down. I'm going to go back 15 seconds so people can understand what he just said. They used us to stop trains. So just listen to the rest of this. I went back 15 seconds. This is the most bizarre shit I had ever heard. And I've listened to it several times. Just listen.
Brakeman. Many railroads used slaves for this hazardous position, the lowest ranking on the train. Their main tasks were helping to stop the train and coupling and uncoupling cars. Brakemen lost their lives by falling off the tops of moving, swaying freight cars, especially at night or in inclement weather, while manually applying brakes on each car. Even on passenger trains, they had to jump back and forth from car to apply brakes. Coupling with link and pins required the brakeman to attach an oval iron link with an iron pin in a pocket at one end of one car, stand between it and the other car, and be ready to drop a pin as the new link entered the new car's pocket, and avoid being crushed as the two cars came together.
About a minute left on this. So it was either you did it or you didn't and got crushed. You didn't have too much leeway there. This is the pressure that was put on. This is supposed to be work. This is supposed to be something like, this is the pressure that they had our men under, not theirs, not anybody else. We obviously know there was nobody else. Nobody else was doing this kind of work. But the way this ends, just to hear how it ends, is so crazy. And then this why I'll need your assessment on just what you've heard here. But then I'll show you what Norfolk Southern. I just got to finish it. I'm sorry. Got to finish it.
Yeah.
So I'll keep running on.
Under improved safety conditions brought about by innovations in braking equipment, white laborers seized the brakeman positions, driving black workers out of the jobs. The history of railroad work is
So when the jobs became safe, we couldn't do those jobs anymore. Then the white people came in and stole those jobs. Okay.
Right.
Just 45 seconds left.
of a general American tendency to disregard the value of black life. Slaveholders who hesitated to hire out their human chattel to the railroads appear to be an exception, but not because they placed an intrinsic worth on black people. Rather, it was because they merely were seeking to protect their investment to assure a longer-term return. Whether pay was made to slave owners or directly to black laborers after slavery as wages, the following comment from Cornweibel is apposite. It is part of the perverse genius of capitalism that a dangerous job does not usually warrant a higher wage. Among the operating crews, brakemen were paid the least.
So the most dangerous job on the railroad was ours until it became not only less dangerous, just less lethal. And then we couldn't qualify for the job. We only qualified for it because we could die at such a high clip. And when they made the job safe enough for other people to work it, then that phased us out. This sounds much like the auto plants where you used to be a machinist working for the big three. But then when they started bringing in the engineers, if you didn't have the degree, they phased you out of the job and brought somebody in half your age and gave them half the pay, really, what they do. So this type of situation, like I said, this is just one company, just one, because there's multiple railroads. This is just one railroad company that I'm speaking about. Is Norfolk Southern. Not saying that this specifically on From Here to Equality was talking about that, but just what you just heard and what we've talked about with the Freedmen's Bureau and not only the lack of resources and the lack of ability to achieve substantive livings and businesses and things like that. How can we turn that around so situations like this don't happen in Ward 5 going forward and around the country?
It's really an outstanding question, and I'm so glad you're bringing this up, because this is where the reparations frame is so illuminating. There's no question that all of these, there are several of these companies that have the same sort of characteristics, this exploitation, and that reparative justice is essential. And that we've got to, when we talk about facing history, we've got to dig into all of this. There's a subcommittee in the city council in Chicago that is doing some of this work, researching these companies. They've mostly been focused on banks, but there's no, especially so the westernmost part of the Fifth Ward has an area called the Pocket, but that's that one part of the neighborhood. It's part of a larger neighborhood that's known as Greater Grand Crossing. Grand Crossing. And so we're for folks who are history buffs, Chicago originally it was a transit hub, and it was the trains coming here. So there's opportunity to kind of hook on to that. I've got a train a half a block away from me. I've got tracks a half a block away from me that are the IC tracks, is what we call them. The Illinois Central train would run through those. Now the Metro mostly uses it, although we still have cargo trains using it. The bottom line is, what we understand from the work that's been done in terms of what the federal government owes because of its active orchestration of chattel slavery, is that we can quantify. If we can identify, we can quantify. And if we can quantify, we can create opportunity for redress.
Okay.
And so I think that every one of these companies owes a debt. What I believe is that the whole kind of inner network of what we need to do to actually systematically get what is owed follows reparations. That's what I believe. I think you need the capacity of a massive lobbying organization, of which, what you would really need is for, if freedmen are all looking at, I think it's a $750,000 to $950,000 cash payment. There are all kinds of numbers people throw out there. But
sure.
when you have assets like that, you can pay into a collective that just has a lobby, just like the gun lobby has in DC. It's a further reparative justice lobby. And so you can systematically go after these companies. You can have a research arm of that looks at what, this is, and you've got this really important piece of information up here that talks about the kind of value that was attached to these lives. And there are lots of ways to look at that. Certainly we can repudiate this as absolutely offensive. On the other hand, it helps us to start to quantify the harm. And so now we're talking about employees of these train lines being, I'm sure, documented somewhere, and we can use that as a kind of an aggregate and start to develop a formula. But I think you need that capacity, because this injustice is everywhere, the entire country, which is why reparations is so powerful and important, because it's a thoroughgoing, it's a forensic audit of an entire nation, public and private. And I believe with that capacity, we could bring companies like this really to account for what they've done. But it's so horrible. I have to tell you, on the one hand, being in the movement, you learn so much. It's so enlightening, and it's always better to be awake than to be asleep.
Right.
But when you do go to sleep, it's a troubled sleep, because you recognize that, whatever measure of comfort and luxury we have in this country came at the most terrible price imaginable. That we were savages to people who in no way, shape, or form ever had done anything. Not that anyone would have deserved what had happened to enslaved Black American citizens, but the complete wanton savagery is our legacy. That's where we live. We live in that country.
Right. I look at all of these things being culpable. I don't put anybody singularly responsible except for the United States government. And that's why I say companies like Norfolk. And I want to bring up, because he's out of the bunker tonight, but Brother Otis just put something up. Andrew Jackson Beard is best known for patenting several rail car coupler innovations between 1887 and 1905. Born of tragedy, he lost the leg coupling cars. His inventions reduced that type of injury. So he took his injury, his life-threatening injury, his life-altering injury, and built patents off of it. This is the ingenuity. This is the brilliance. This is the magnificence. This is Black boy magic that we don't hear about.
That's
this man lost a leg and went on to make trains safer. He could have went and sat in a corner and died crazy somewhere. But he took that detriment and turned it around and invented things to make this profession, because it's a profession. They might have not wanted to say it was a profession, but it was a profession.
Yeah.
Well, it was a profession to them, but we did the labor as grunts, and really we were just carnage. We weren't even really grunt workers. I mean, you could leave. There's probably a better chance of you dying on that job than it is for a policeman to die on their job every day. I mean, you had a chance to just die. Now, I know cops can die every day, but there's a better chance for you dying working for the railroad back then than it is for you walking out of your house as a law enforcement officer. So this situation with Norfolk, this is my axe to grind with Norfolk. So Norfolk had a history in the slave trade. The Mobile and Girard Company, which is now part of Norfolk Southern, offered slaveholders $180, which would be $3,379 today, a piece for enslaved Africans they would rent to the railroad for 1 year. $180 for 1 year. $3,300 in today's dollars, according to the records. The Central of Georgia, another company aligned with Norfolk Southern Line today, valued its slaves at $31,303. Now, that's $663,033 today dollars. I just did this math, and you tell me if this would be plausible. If we took a company and just identified Norfolk Southern as detrimental. Now, they owe 40 million American freedmen. I mean, well, we're going by lineage, so I know they said there's 40 million of us, but I don't know if that's just 40 million black folks or 40 million American freedmen. But I just want to go with what you got in Ward 5. You've got 29,000 American freedmen because you got 58% of 50,000 people. So you got 29,000 American freedmen. If we took 29,000 American freedmen and gave them $663,000 over time, I'm a realist. I'm not saying they got to come up with all this money, because they're going to not only come up with it in the 5th ward, they're going to come up with it in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, however many wards you got in Chicago. But I'm talking about across the country. But let's just focus on your ward, 29,000 American freedmen. That'd be about $22,000 and some change, I believe. It's a little bit more, because I did 663 divided. It was like 22.8 or something like that. So say 22.8 per American freedman in today's dollars. Say if they all got 660, they broke that down 22,000 a year or what was it? Hold on one second. So if we broke, I'm sorry. No, what I did was, excuse me, I'm sorry. My math is off a little bit. I'm getting a little slap happy. 663.33. Okay. And then it was 54 years. Going to divide that by 54 years. So that's $12,278 per American freedman per year for 54 years. That's how many years that Norfolk Southern took part in the slave trade with workers. Now you've got 29,000. So 29,000 American freedmen. We're just going to do it times 29. That's 356,073,278. Now that's everybody. But paying it out over time, they're not going to come up with this money. We want it to happen over a 54-year period. So take that money and divide it over 54 years. This is pumping into the 5th ward. $6,593,949, roughly. Okay. That's money that could come into the ward, could come into the Freedmen's Bureau, and be able to not only put businesses on the map, keep businesses moving, put kids through school. We're talking all types of stuff that could happen. And that's just from Norfolk Southern. This ain't no other railroad. Or you can just do whatever you want to with it. But let's just say, because reparations is going to happen on a national scale, this would just be from one company. And we know that there's tons of companies that benefited off the slave trade. So when we break things down and we talk about local repair, and I know that Chicago is a railroad hub, why ain't Chicago going at Norfolk Southern for what they did to American freedmen and enslaved people? Because they're owed money.
Right. This goes back to my position that Chicago is not in the business of lifting up its black citizens, black American citizens. Because what you're saying, if we just talk about constituents, citizens, regular people, and I'm the mayor, and you say, Mr. Mayor, I can bring in $6 million a year for the next 40 years to this ward. I say, where do I sign? That sounds fantastic. I'm
Right.
gonna be elected for life, because that's any ethnic group that you can do that for is 30%. We're 30% black, 30% Latino, 30% white. You're gonna help any of those groups. I'm starting with the 30% base in a city where, you know, elections are often 25, 30% of the people coming out to vote. So you have to actively not want resources to go to a certain group of people to not pursue this. Because this,
Right.
for a government, this is a side project. I put
Right.
3 of my lawyers out of my, you know, army of lawyers that the city has. I
Mhm.
spend so much time spending money on my cops. I can't spend a little bit of money bringing, you know, so there's a vested interest in not pursuing the railroads. And, you know, Chicago politicians, whenever you try to do anything that has to do with the railroads, they'll defend the railroad first. We try to get an embankment cleaned, and you would think the railroads had voted for the alderman. They'll say, well, you know, those embankments, the railroads are doing the best they can. They have a lot of territory to cover. It's like they're talking about their child and why they, you know, stole some candy.
Wow.
They get an excuse for everything. So you know, it really is a vested interest in what I think is that when you start to make wealth move differently than it moves now in a profound way, and what you're talking
Mhm.
about is facing history. There's a lot of interest that understand the floodgate you're opening just by what you just did on the air live just now, just by the math you just did now. If across the country people understood that, that's dangerous. That's dangerous knowledge, because, like you said, now add up all the railroads, add the insurance companies with a
Right.
very similar kind of scenario, add the banks. You know, there's all of these companies that benefited from specifically the suffering of, because the thing, it's not just
I'm gonna do that
you're
stream this week, damn it. I'm doing that stream because I got them. I
do
mean,
it.
I got these type of facts about
It's powerful.
14
It's so
other
powerful.
companies, Gabe.
You
And
got to write a book, man. You got to write a book.
hey man, you know what? I got a 3-year-old at my helmet every day right now. So I'm trying, I'm trying to
Okay,
just
I
survive,
take it
bro.
back. I take
I'm
it
trying to
back.
just survive.
That's
But
a
no,
full-time job, man.
it is. And my lady, she gets much of the grunt work, but I got that part of the work where, you know, I'm grandpa, so they hit
I
me and
understand.
slap
Yep.
me, and you know, they take all
Yep.
that physical energy from me.
Yep.
And I'm the cooker. You know, I'm known as the cooker here. You know, I cook. So
Nice. Nice.
I love the fact that she's in my life the way, because she is keeping me young and she's keeping me up. But
That's
this type of
beautiful.
thing is what fuels me, because I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this
Right.
for my grandkids. I'm
Right.
doing
I
this
feel you.
for my kids, for my grandkids, but because they're not going to have the same accesses that I had. You know, I was talking to a brother today. I hate still being the youngest black man to ever own a restaurant in the city that I grew up in. I don't care no more. I want there to be
Right.
more people like me. I want there to
Right.
be more young African American, if I got to say that for y'all tonight, but American freedmen entrepreneurs. And like I said, there's
Right.
nothing wrong with barbershops. There's nothing wrong with barbecue restaurants. There's nothing wrong with car detailing and car washes. But that's what they want us to do. What
They
we
want it
really
to
need to
end
move.
there.
And they want it to end there. Don't open up 2 shops, because now what you're
Right.
trying to do. Now you're trying to really move the needle. They'd rather have you struggling in your mom and pop shop. But you start talking about multiple location and franchising and this, that, and the other. Now you're starting to mess with that infrastructure.
Yes.
And that's what they don't want. And that's what the Freedmen's Bureau could be. That's what a national schedule of reparations could be. But starting with companies like this on the local end, it gives us a foothold to be able to get the accesses, because the government's going to be slow to come. We already know with the reparations. They were slow to talk about it. They're going to be slow to come with the check. But companies
Right.
like this, dude, if you still want to function out here, you better cough up what you know we're owed and what you did to our people. And it just ain't Norfolk. I'm picking on Norfolk because they've been doing craziness out here in Ohio
Right.
and Michigan. So they're the elephant in the room right now. Just like I want to segue,
Right.
because I damn near kept you for 2 hours. I want to segue to, we were just talking about policing. I want to segue
Yes.
to what your platform is your public safety strategy that's holding police accountable. Because I scream qualified immunity, and be like, what are you talking about? And
Right.
People don't realize how much that would just change our lives. We can't just live and die on qualified immunity. There's got to be some other adjustments in law enforcement.
Right.
But I want to hear your planning for public safety strategies and holding police accountable in the ward and across the country, because this is about your ward, but then something that could be adaptable across the country, because you done laid out so much tonight, and I was trying to keep this at 90 minutes, to be honest with you. And Marlon, he might have fell asleep. We ain't brought him up in so long, but I'm gonna bring Marlon back.
Marlon never sleeps.
You know what? You're right, because I'll be up there liking his foolishness he be putting on Facebook in the middle of the night. Marlon will drop a couple posts and be having me laughing in the middle of the night sometime. His personality is off the charts. It's so
I never woke him up yet. I never caught him sleep yet.
So he's alternal. He ain't nocturnal. He's alternal. So
he alternal. He just always keeping him awake.
Yeah,
he got that ambition,
He does.
Right.
He does. And passion will keep you awake. I mean,
yes,
passion will keep you awake. So, where do you see policing, and what is your strategy for being able to hold police accountable in your ward, and what it could look like even across the country as well?
I appreciate this question so much. And, I've come to a place now, as I've talked about how I think about policing, I get feedback from people, and there are conversations, and my views always are honed by talking to voters. So now I start by saying this: when we talk about public safety and we talk about controlling the criminal element, which is what a lot of people start with when they talk, I say the problem with that as a concept is our definition of criminal is too narrow. And if we widen, I'm all for going after criminals. Just widen the scope and recognize that you're including landlords who are engaged in criminal abuse of tenants, and police who
on a daily basis in this country. And I'll tell you, they are in our neighborhoods in Chicago. They're a military force. They're an occupying force. So, you've got to hold them accountable, but you also have to recognize that there's going to be police. So, I understand defund the police in that whole movement, and I appreciate the spirit of that, because we know that these are really 21st century slave patrols. So we know that we're dealing with a very volatile, it's like a bomb that's driving around our neighborhoods. But on the other hand, we also have to, acknowledge, especially older folks in the community say, I want police. When they say that, people don't always understand. What they're saying is they want police that act like the way police are supposed to act. Right.
They want, state public safety professionals. That's what they want. So there are a few things you need to do. And you started where everyone should start: qualified immunity. If I can... Look, I was a journalist for 18 years, working journalist for 18 years. If I could write anything I just made up, I could just say, I quote you, and you said this and you said that, and I can say I was someplace I wasn't, and there were no consequences, because if you tried to sue me, I'd say, hey, I'm immune from, any kind of libel. It would be a horrible profession, because there'd be no control, quality control. So qualified immunity is step one. And step two and step three, because it's really, once there's a consequence, and police say this all the time. Police will talk to you about deterrence until they're blue in the face, and yet they don't want to be deterred. But if if there are consequences to what they're doing, then they'll be less likely to do it. Now, we're still going to have problems, because the system is designed, they are there to terrorize Black communities, in addition to doing other things. But that's really a main function in urban centers. So in Chicago, I'm part of a movement that pushed for civilian oversight of the police, and we've gotten very close. We passed a law recently that's sort of the soft part of the big vision. And if I'm elected, I'm going to make sure the hard part gets in, which is actually to elect a board of civilians that the people pick, and they're elected, and they have the power to fire the superintendent. And in addition to a number of other powers. But that is critical. Regular folks that can say, you're out of line, you're fired. There's a lot more to that, but civilian oversight of police is essential. that's been a movement here for about, well, it's been a long time, but what we have most recently has definitely been over 10 years of organizing have brought us to a point. And that's just critical. We also need to, so our budget every year, the city of Chicago increases the police budget. Every year in the city of Chicago, arrests go down. So we literally have more police every year if they are able to get them. Hiring has become a problem. But when they do, we've got more cops on the street because they've gotten a bigger budget, and more police are doing less arresting. They're not doing their basic job. So we have to stop giving them more money. And I say smarter budget, not bigger budget. And by smarter budget, I say first you trim that budget, because like literally this last budget had earmarks for 2 helicopters. Why do we need 2 helicopters in the city of Chicago? They've got helicopters already. They just wanted more helicopters. It's like kids in a Sears catalog, like when we were little, and you would order stuff from Christmas from the Sears catalog.
Helicopters?
We don't need choppers. We've got choppers here already.
Right.
I just don't understand why we need them, period. I lived in Los Angeles after the Rodney King unrest. And I'll tell you, to me, police should not have helicopters. Helicopters are a weapon the way police use them. They come down low. They kind of strafe neighborhoods, like they buzz poor black neighborhoods.
Like they're buzzing sheep, like airplanes.
Yeah, they
buzzing sheep.
traumatize you.
Yeah.
I got somebody right now that I follow on Twitter, we're mutuals, who's just documenting that. And I experience it. When she describes it, I remember what it was like to be there in the 90s when they were just on you everywhere in any of the neighborhoods outside of the, kind of nice ones. Anyway, they're wasting money. So you trim the budget, but you also tie some amount of that budget to performance. And by performance, I don't mean, when I say they're arresting less people, I'm not saying I want more people in jail. I'm saying they're not doing anything and we keep paying them. I want to see evidence of de-escalation. I want to see evidence of them referring emergency calls to the proper professionals instead of showing up everywhere. There's a mental health crisis. They show up, and if it's black folks, they kill someone. I can't tell you how many stories. It's heartbreaking just in this city alone where that's the outcome. Domestic disturbances, same thing. So, you reward them for not doing that stuff, because when they do that stuff, it ends, I think, tragically. So you trim that. We call it here treatment, not trauma, but it's basically just putting the crises in the right kind of, in the hands of the right people. It is so important when we talk about public safety that we talk about economics, and people don't do that. So there's a causal relationship between housing insecurity and violent crime. They're like, it's like you can't help. You create housing insecurity, violent crime goes up. You stabilize housing, violent crime goes down. So I go back to this idea that you broaden the lens and you look at all the criminals. So we need to go after the landlords that are creating housing insecurity by jumping the gun on evictions. To evict somebody with insufficient cause should be criminal. There should be a consequence to that. Because if I show up at your house with a gun and I make you leave and I take that over and I give it to somebody else, that's against the law. So why, if I can do it with a pen, is it now legal? That's not, it doesn't make any sense. And again, just like the cops, you've got to deter white collar crime. You don't just worry about the people on the street. Now, the people on the street are a problem too. I'm not going to act like that's not the case. And really what that requires is a presence on the ground. And to me, that's not a police presence. Police are a hammer, and there are very few fix-it projects that require a nail, and therefore you need the hammer for it. What you really need is regular folks walking around, and that again goes back to economics. So you need a reason for people to be walking around. I want the whole city to be great. I want the whole country to be great, but I want to become the 5th Ward Alderman. I want to move the criminals out of my ward. I want the police. I want the violent, the dangerous police, which is most of them, unfortunately, in Chicago. I want the slum landlords, and I want the knuckleheads on the street to all say it's more trouble than it's worth to be in the 5th Ward. I'm just going to go over here and do my dirt over here. That's all. I don't, honestly, it's not that I don't care about other places, but I don't care to trade the safety and security in real life of the folks that I'm trying to represent for some kind
Right.
of a pie in the sky, let's fix the big problem first.
Right.
I'm running
Right.
you all out of town.
Right.
And then, I want my neighborhood, I want you to be able to put a wallet on the sidewalk and, not on purpose, but if something falls,
I know what you mean.
you know exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. And I know how you get there. You get there by closing the system. And I've seen neighborhoods, including Black neighborhoods, be that way for a moment of time. And it's like, I'm telling you, in Chicago, South Shore was that way. Chatham, which is a neighborhood south of the South Shore, there are people, if they know the South Side watching, know what I'm talking about. It was a beautiful middle-class neighborhood. They did things like, this is a really nice little tip. It's a side thing, but everyone should think about this. In Chatham, you couldn't sell your house through a realtor. They achieved a middle-class community through very careful, painstaking work. And if they saw a for sale sign one of their neighbors put out on the lawn, they would remove it and they would go to the door and they would knock and say, why didn't you tell us you want to sell your house? We'll find you a buyer. And they would make sure that exchange was done so that the appropriate people moved in. Now, I know some people that sounds like outrageous and classist or what, I understand. But my point is, look, they're taking care of a problem because the outside world was trying to destroy their community. And sure enough, the city of Chicago undid that because the city of Chicago made the people who were renting in that stable middle-class community take unscreened housing voucher holders. Now, let me right away say nothing wrong with voucher holders. I live in an apartment building where 4 out of the 6 of our units are folks with using that subsidy. If I could use it and I needed to, I would absolutely do that. However, when you do not screen, no matter what group of people it is, you're going to run into problems. And the way crime chases people who are impoverished, you're going to cause real problems. So the city of Chicago, in my view, deliberately blockbusted that community so that it is no longer a safe place for Black folks to build wealth. And I think that's, I say it and I mean it. The city of Chicago and many cities in this country are not friends to Black neighborhoods. They disrupt, they devalue, they traumatize. And you just have to, I mean, at what point do we say it's not a coincidence, decade after decade after decade? It's not a bug, it's the feature.
Right. And the crazy thing, we talked about this right at the beginning, where banks are in business to keep us out of business. The thing is, when in our neighborhoods, the quote unquote Black neighborhood, we know property values are going to be lower. We know, so on a business side, somebody wanting to try to start up a business, they're going to be less likely to be able to attain a business loan because that is looked at as a distressed area by the bank. So it's not looked at as a viable commodity for them to loan money to, because how are you going to pay me back when nobody does business in this community because nobody has money in this community? And all you're going to do is get broken into and robbed and be filing insurance claims. They do that to us versus giving us the opportunity. Whereas I know on the other side of town where crime might be a little bit lower, this guy can come in with no credit score, sign his name to a business loan based on what he looks like, based on a couple personal references he may have because his family knows business owners and this, that, and the other. Well, we don't have those references a lot of time as up and coming entrepreneurs. We don't have letter of references from people that are in our community that own businesses. I bet you there's a Black owned business in this neighborhood or in my community called Puffer Reds. And he's been in business over 40 years. And I bet you he's written letters of recommendation for potential entrepreneurs who have wanted to do business in his corridor or just in the city of Ypsilanti, because he's known as a reputable businessman. He's known as somebody who's done really well. But there ain't 5 other Black businesses like him that could give those letters of reference, because nobody's been able to make that stake that he's made. Once again, that's where the Freedmen's Bureau comes in, being basically a guarantor for up and coming businesses and things like that. So this is why I need people not to try to be so pessimistic or ambivalent. You need to jump in, because we're not just talking about reparations tonight on a national level. We're talking about local politics in your front yard, not backyard, in your front yard.
Yes,
And
yes, sir.
What you talked about, the home loans, that's happening here. For sale signs aren't going up in these gentrified communities, but the people who need to know. The people who qualified to buy, they come in and buy. Not only are they coming in and buying, they coming in and buying, tearing it down, and rebuilding a new structure that's worth 3 times as much as basically the house that's right next door. But what did that do? That just raised that property value of that house up next door. We're not going to be able to buy that house again. So, but Brother Marlon's coming in. He flashing in. He flashing in.
All right.
Yeah. So the campaign man, and I think he got a stogie too. I think he got a stogie with him. So we're gonna bring Brother Marlon back up here.
I love it.
We want to bring Brother Marlon back up here. We just in here chopping it up, Marlon. I mean, we done got not off track, but I wanted to go a different way with this tonight. I think he's trying to unmute, and I'm muting him. My fault.
Yeah.
I didn't want to give Gabe the same pitches that he's been getting on these other streams. I know everybody's
this is good. This is this is a really good format. Very
thank
good.
you. Thank you.
But I see you flame up every now and then. So this is in honor of Freedmen Media.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was trying to hold some decorum in here with Gabe on here tonight, but don't think I won't light up on y'all.
I got this for you. This is just for you. This is just
okay. Because see,
when I see you, we go smoke one together.
Yeah, I look at this movement, and that's another question. How are American freedmen, cannabis entrepreneurs being treated in Chicago?
Let me answer that.
Yes, please do.
Well, I'll let Marlon go first.
No, go.
I'll let Marlon go first.
I was actually finna tell y'all I got to get up early, so I'm about to go to sleep on y'all.
we almost done. Go ahead. Yeah, we almost done.
No, go ahead and answer that question, Gabe. I just want to.
I'm just gonna say
my honor towards this show with my Rocky Patel. That's all I jumped in for.
I likes that.
But go ahead,
Gabe. When the state of Illinois legalized cannabis and they distributed the licenses to sell, every single license went to an out-of-state white-owned medical cannabis company. And they used the advocacy. I mean, it was 100% social justice movement in terms of how they got it passed. They brought everyone in from cannabis advocacy groups from the South Side and the West Side, all the black folks. They used them. Supposedly, they were writing the legislation with them. And then they put them in the front for the press conferences to say, this is about justice. We're going to invest in black communities. There aren't any cannabis stores. I think there's one on the far South Side. Marlon can square that away. There is now one black-owned cannabis literally just opened up. It's been years that this has been going on, since before the pandemic, that they legalized cannabis, and it's still basically a white-owned business. And I'm furious. And it did something really unfortunate where some folks like myself kind of saw it coming. And so we were talking about this publicly. We were saying, look, this is not going to be what you all think it's going to be, which created rifts in the community because the advocates really believed that they were going to get some of the stuff that they were fighting for. And so we ended up going head to head. It was very cleverly done. So you had kind of hurt feelings and some anger, and people even kind of not talking to each other, because it sounds like you're messing with the economic livelihood. If cannabis revenue did come to black communities, that could be really valuable. That could be a really huge asset. I have concerns about cannabis and young people. I have worked with high school kids, and I think that there's some cognitive challenges that happen when there's a lot of use when people are young. So I have worries. I'm more on that side of the spectrum than the legalized side of the spectrum. But I've always said it's like gun control. It's fine to have a national conversation about weed and about guns, but you can't dictate to any black neighborhood whether people should have weapons, and any economy that's going to bring money into it, whether it should be in there or not. Because safety and commerce are where historically Black folks have been disadvantaged to such an extreme degree that it's nobody else's business, literally. I think from neighborhood to neighborhood, there should be 100% autonomy. If you want to have people strapping guns like the Wild West and smoking weed all over the place, that's nobody's business, or any other form of commerce. It's not just marijuana. It's
Sure.
because that's the stuff that we, again, the reparative justice frame, it's reparations. We have to face history and recognize the place we are in the world. This is about seeing the world as it is. Ultimately, when we talk about these local policies through that
Right.
reparations frame, it's like, just be honest, just be real.
Right.
And so people got screwed. That's the bottom line. There is no Black cannabis sub industry in Chicago. There's one family, and they're from the South Side. And when they open their business, it's as far north, it's as far away from Black folks as they could get. And
Wow.
just as the coincidence of geography, they're about as close to Evanston as they can be too.
Come on
So
now.
that's I'm sorry, I didn't write the book, but someone with a wicked sense of humor did.
Wow.
Because these kinds of ironic twists are brutal.
And as far as cultivation and things like that, now I know, I mean, is Chicago in a way where they have processing and things like that, where there's commercial growers and stuff like that? I mean, that didn't trickle down, and I want to say trickle down.
Yeah,
so basically Chicago came in corporate. Yeah. Chicago was never grassroots. They came in corporate. Okay, so what
you
Michigan
bottom lined it very well. Yeah,
Michigan flipped it. Michigan was grassroots truly before legalization. Then when it became medicinal, then they went somewhat corporate. By the time it was full-blown recreational, they're up out of the paint. We had one Black-owned facility in my hometown in Ann Arbor. She's out already. And she was out because she was undercapitalized, reparations. She lacked resources, reparations. She lacked access, reparations, where she was not only a former executive in the county, she was a surviving cancer patient, and she's an American Freedman. How couldn't she get resources and shouldn't have had financial backing right there? A cancer patient, a county employee, and she's an American Freedman. So she should have been getting threefold access, but she got nothing and ended up making some type of deal, and she's already spun out of the game already.
Listen, a whole nother conversation we need to have. And I was the president of the board of a recovery center for women in my neighborhood for a while. Is the entire idea that we are making up for the war on drugs is a lie. Legalization of cannabis is exactly and nothing more than white boomers wanting to be able to smoke weed and not get nervous about it.
Yeah.
And their cokehead kids wanting to be able to do a line every once in a while when they close a deal or whatever. This is about a whole different, and it's recreational, and they've got the resources that if that gets out of control, they can go into rehab. So in their mind, to me, legalization is like this with harm reduction. And people love harm reduction, but I'll tell you, harm reduction as a concept, and this is a whole, like I said, it's a whole other show, but I'm just going to say this right now.
Sure.
The folks that are most down on their luck in neighborhoods like ours, the Black folks who need a place to get clean and not get a little bit better and then go back to their habit, harm reduction will murder them. And I know those people. I'm not making, that's right. There's no such thing. You got that exactly right, Roz. And it's good to see you. I've been seeing you popping up. It's never been about that. That's a lie. It's that's in the idea that you're gonna make things better for Black folks through, you legalize. It sounded so good that we all just wanted to believe that, surely people wouldn't lie that boldly. I just never, my concern actually was about the kids. I was like, well, I know they're going to cut a piece that'll be too small off for Black folks, but it'll be a piece. And of course they'll have the weed shops in the, in Southside neighborhood. Like, to me, those were givens. Nope.
Right.
Nope. Nothing.
That is crazy to me. And so where you have it there, they're being overran in New York City, where they've already got a ton of illegal shops that are open and they can't control it. And I'm sure that the legal shops are probably not functioning above board because hell, they can't keep up with the illegal shops. They're probably pushing product through that's probably not passing through metrics through New York. And, I mean, it is what it is. But that's because I think a lot of these states are coming in on the corporate level. They're not going with we called it caregivers here. They're not going with the caregivers who are the grassroots people in the state. They're allowing these national brands to come in, whether it be from cultivation to edibles to whatever type of product that they can sell, and they're allowing them to take over. And I saw it happening, but I thought I was actually a part of the wheel. I'm a chef, and I did edibles. I started back tinkering in 14, 15, and really didn't, get right until like 17, and lobbied. I was out there with clipboards, multiple counties, this, that, and the other, doing the petitioning.
Okay.
And I got, I was in it. I'm not just a pothead. I was in it. I was in it politically, and I got spun out. I got spun out because I was a little guy, man. I was a processor, and where I was at one point dispensaries with my product, my product that came from my two hands, from my brain. But my thing was I wasn't big enough. And I wasn't large enough and didn't have the capital or license. It was a game. So they played me as long as I could stay in it, I stayed in it. And it was like, oh, you need this app fee, you need this, and you need you also need $250,000 to have been sitting somewhere for 36 months, verifiable funds, just that. 250,000 sitting. If I had 250,000 sitting, I probably wouldn't be doing this. I'd probably be doing something else. But that's what they did to us.
Very familiar.
I think
this also.
Yep. And I think that's what they did from the outset with Chicago and New York. Yes. And they're not even allowing people to even get up off the ground, in areas like yourself. So, where I had a couple year run where I was in there, where they're not even allowing people. So, oh, you can't do it? Okay, well, we got the corporate to come in. That's their excuse. We're not going to let this whole industry die. We voted for this and lobbied for this. We're not going to let this industry die. We'll just bring commercial in. And that's the craziness of it all, that social equity is a scam. They talk about social equity. It's a total scam.
It is,
because they don't let you be a real store using social equity. We're not gonna let you come in on a coupon value and let you function the way Loom or these other national brands. You'd have to be a mom and pop type operation on that level too. And it's nuts. And I don't want to get off the conversation too much because I really want to end strong here with Marlon. I know he's still in tow. He's just off camera right now. This is the last week. We're technically almost 7 days, about 35 more minutes, and it'll be 7 days before the election.
That's right.
The big thing for us is to make sure that everybody that can vote for you does vote for you. But please give up some pertinent facts. If I'll have Gabe stand back, Marlon, you come in as the campaign manager. What can people do in and outside of the ward over the next 7 days to push Gabe over the top? Because as we talk about this, I want to bring this up and I want y'all to close on this.
Do your research, I see.
I do a little homework every now and then. I do a little homework. I do a little homework, but I never miss lunch. I won't be at lunch and recess, but I do a little homework. This right here was something, right? I mean, you need this type of in your face stuff. And when I read this and I was like, wait a minute, this sounds kind of familiar to my area, where you got people lobbying and politicking in areas that they really don't stay in.
Yeah.
So if you can talk about what can be done over the next 7 days to help push Gabe for 5 over, I want to talk about that. And then Gabe, I want you to end on what happened here. And, really, I want to thank you. I just want to start by thanking you now, so I'll have a slower exit. But please just be ready to cook on this after Marlon just states, what we can do to help out over this next 7.
So thank you again, my brother, Freedmen Media.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for allowing us to come on and share Gabe's campaign. What you guys can do to help, right now we're doing phone banking. So you can reach out to myself, or you can reach out to, actually you can go to Gabe's website, hit the volunteer button, put your information in, and we'll reach out to you. So you can help us with phone banking. And if you can help us with money. I've worked a bunch of elections. I can't even count how many that I've worked so far. I don't even know, but every last one of them costs money. Not one of them was done without money. And that's the oil that greases the wheel of politics, particularly in Chicago. And election day is ultra critical. You know, you need money throughout, but election day is one of the most important days of the campaign, only because everybody's voting, but because there's a lot of money that's necessary to help get out the vote on that day. So if you like what we're doing, if you think this is important and you can help us financially, go to Gabe's website, gabe45.com, GABEFORFIVE.com, hit that donate button and send us some money.
And it's as cut and dry as that, y'all. One of the things that we have to be cognizant of is these things not only cost money, but we've also got to stop being afraid of, or we got to stop being afraid for asking for money for the right things. We put up enough bad bread out here. These are causes that we need to be really moving for. And, you know, I mean, I'm literally just looking at my Cash App. I ain't got it on the Cash App. So I'm gonna have my treasurer, who's upstairs asleep right now, make sure she moves some Freedmen Media money in, because I need to be leading by example. So by morning, expect 50 from Freedmen Media. My main thing is this.
Thank you.
I need people to understand politics from, this is where we are. You know, we ain't trying to buy Gabe. We ain't trying to do this. To keep these things running, you need money. And what Gabe's doing on a day-to-day basis, you do 2-3 lives sometimes just by yourself, not being on other people's podcasts. It means that he's taking time, he's putting in the effort, but there's other resources that need to be taken care of during this campaign to run it all the way through election day. So what Brother Marlon just said, it was very, very cut and dry. We've got the banner running right across gabe45.com. You can go there. You can hit donate. We had his Cash App, which is really $ Gabriel Piemonte for Cash App. Please put something in the till. You know, everybody's not going to be able to do 100. Everybody's not going to be able to do 50. Everybody's not going to be able to do 10. If you do, if we get 1,000 people to do $1 a piece, if we get 1,000 people to do $1 a piece, see, I just think in numbers differently the way a lot of people are. Oh man, I ain't got $20, but that's okay. Put $1 in, I'll find 999 more people and we get him 1,000, because that's the way we have to think, where we'll go spend $80 for a concert ticket for somebody that's going to lip sync half the show. Y'all got to stop doing this stuff. I will sing the songs live for $40. You ain't got to go to no lip sync show no more for $80. I will sing the stuff live for $40 for you. So, but seriously, we are just in a space, man, where we need politicians advocating the way you are advocating. Freedmen first. If this is 58% of your ward is Freedmen, how you look not advocating for us? Over 1 out of 2 is American Freedmen. For you to be coming in here talking about POC, you know, and that's why you said it, and I'm glad you said it. Man, we can't rely on the NAACP no more. I don't rely on nobody that still calls themselves colored anyway. But they not the NAACP no more. They the NAAPOC. They dealing with people of color. They're not even dealing with colored people. And my problem with that is they're still as big as they are nationally. They talk about BLM stole 90 million. Do you know the NAACP Defense Fund got over 100 million? And I didn't see them bail nobody out of jail during no marches. I didn't see them represent nobody at none of these court cases. Where's that money going? If that's in their legal defense fund and they ain't litigated for nobody, where is that money going? It's going to people of color. It's defending POCs. It's not defending CPs. It's defending POCs. So where that is, that's crooked politics. We already know that. Speaking of crooked politics, let's just go on and put this on up here again. And please just tell me about
Yeah.
this Yancey guy.
So this is, I think, this is I guess what you could call a teachable moment.
Yes, sir.
And so we have a challenge. One of the things that's happened in my personal life as I've become more fully educated about reparations and therefore about the distinction between Black American politics and liberal politics is that a bunch of my white friends are my former white friends, because they think there's something wrong with me. I got a call from one of my larger supporters when I ran in 2019. They called me a couple of months ago and said, we're not going to give you anything because you support reparations, and we think that's unfair. And we had a whole conversation about, why they thought that was unfair. But my point is that liberal politics and Black politics, you can have alliances. And I think I'm trying to model a way that this works, but liberal politics are on the surface, on the face of it, I mean to say, really problematic for Black communities. So this gentleman, Desmond Yancey. Desmond, he's done work in an adjacent community. He lives in the suburbs. He recently got an apartment in the ward. Looks like he got it in time to make the kind of technical, meet the technical requirements.
Right.
But there's huge amounts of evidence that he got it and then continued to live in the suburbs.
Okay.
He got mail related to the campaign sent there. He didn't register to vote until, after kind of the time when he should have already been settled in the area. And, a lot of this stuff is just Chicago politics, and it is what it is. But it became kind of galling when he, to defend himself as this was coming up, started kind of doubling down on lies. Now, this guy has all the money in this campaign. We have a huge number of contributors compared to anybody else who's running. We have about 50 contributors, and I'd say 40, a little over 40 of them are freedmen. Okay. So, and quite a few of them are $10 and $20 donations. And I love it. I love it because if people do go to gabe45.com, take a look. I've put a donors map up. And you can see all over the country, the Deep South has donated. California has donated. New York has donated. And those are freedmen. And there are freedmen on the phones right now from all over the country, too. And that's what we need to all do for each other, I believe. This is the opposite of that. This guy is on the board of a PAC, a political action committee, that funds liberal, left-wing, some of them socialist candidates. I'm all for socialism. I just believe that we need Black socialism, because socialism, the way we talk about it in the United States, is actually European socialism. And it suggests that a rising tide lifts all boats. So it's really going to replicate, those policies are going to replicate the inequity and put Black folks last. And the PACs reflect that. United Working Families is very active, very dynamic, and right on point in Latino communities. Their policies, their list of policies is like a wish list for people in those communities. United Working Families supported the incumbents, which have done things like in my neighborhoods, in the 5th Ward where Marlon and I live, we have slumlords who literally are doing eviction by neglect. So property values, because of the Obama Center development that's going up, are going through the roof. They're getting rid of their tenants by having the heat off. We have a building, tenants I've met with, their heat just went on last week since Christmas. They've had no heat since the end of December. They were given space heaters after complaining for about 10 days.
What?
There's a guy,
in Chicago?
It's criminal. In Chicago, in the winter. Damn. If your alderman isn't getting on building inspectors in Chicago, building inspectors don't show up. That's how this works. And United Working Families, who supports Desmond Yancey and who Desmond sits on their board, supported Leslie Hairston, the sitting alderman, who let that kind of thing happen. I mean, that's one example. We don't have time to get into a lot of it, but basically, if you don't, aldermen have a responsibility to run all the private and public kind of accountability, because everything is so tied to graft in this city. It's all designed to give all politicians an opportunity to get a little, a taste of whatever, that you've got to make sure that everything's on the up and up, or else regular people suffer. And in Black neighborhoods, of course, they suffer disproportionately. This guy, these folks, they don't care and haven't historically cared that we had an incumbent who was letting that kind of stuff happen. So he's on the board of this PAC. The incumbent says she's not going to run for re-election. His board, including him, decides he should run. So he announces he's going to run. There's all of this evidence that he's not in the ward. He doesn't, he responds to that by sending mailers out talking about how he's lived in the neighborhood for a long time, rather than come to terms with these facts that were collected by the different candidates that you see. And then he starts telling additional lies. He announced that he was endorsed by a progressive alderman who happens to be a friend of mine. So I immediately texted her, and she said she hadn't endorsed him. And I called him on it, and he's kind of backed off.
So y'all got your own little George Santos over there in the 5th Ward.
It's lie after lie, my friend. And it's lies because in their
own little George Santos.
Yeah, it's a fiction. You don't have to be accountable. CTU, the Chicago Teachers Union, again, in certain parts of the city, they do important work. When Rahm Emanuel announced he was closing 50 public schools, and about 40 of them were in Black neighborhoods, CTU, which has struck over things like air conditioning, didn't do a thing. So these liberal institutions, that's a fact, and anyone can Google
There was no fight for it?
They did not strike. They said it wasn't in the legal parameters of what they could strike for to strike when school closures were announced. That's what they said. And that's all
schools, though. That don't even sound
50.
Right, Gabe.
It broke a record. No, we've never had that many schools closed in the United States before. That's Soviet level kind of,
So
urban,
basically we was going back to enslavement times. I mean, they killed us.
This is
they
Rahm.
killed us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Wow.
This is Rahm, who hid the truth about Laquan McDonald, who was brutalized by a gang of police. This is, Ron McDonald, who knows where all the Clintons' bodies are buried. So, Chicago is the most American city, I always say. And I think Illinois is the most American state because the pretense is off. It is what it is in America.
Right.
So they have rolled in, they picked this guy. There are 11, there were 12 candidates. So there were 11 candidates, and they said, none of those are progressive enough for us. We want the guy who's on the inside. And they put a ton of money on this guy. He's been making stuff up. And so we said, well, there's a bunch of us who have looked at this evidence. We think it's compelling. We're going to present as a collective because in our mind, we all have our networks and people who trust and believe us. Any one of us saying this stuff, you'd say, oh, it's, that's politics. You got one politician saying another politician's lying. The other one says the first one's lying. But you get a half a dozen people with standing in different parts of the ward, and that amounts to something. So, this guy, in my opinion, is a good example of special interests trying to extract wealth and power and influence from the Black community. And yeah, he's a Black man. That's true. But it is also the case that, there have been a lot of folks who were Black who, yes, that's right. Rahm Emanuel also set up a police academy that our current mayor is making happen. It's tens of millions of dollars, and it's basically urban terrorism training center. So they're
wait a
learning
minute.
how
This is Cop City. This is the Cop City. They building basically a small. They're building like a little small community. Like they just, it's it'd be like Universal Studios for cops. They just setting it up like, oh, dude. Ron started that too. He
set so many things in motion, and really, this current mayor is kind of just executing a lot of Rahm's plans. And so we, basically getting back to this thing to just kind of wrap it up, we presented this to say, look, this guy is misrepresenting himself. He's not from the community, and that matters a lot. It matters a great deal because, for example, I've been doing work in the community and living in the community for 24 years. I started organizing with a group of people for a credit union 23 years ago because we recognized the need. Wallace Good, who's another guy who's running, he's been working as the head of a chamber of commerce for over a decade. There are other people who have spent long periods of time and, really invested in the community. And those are the people you should be choosing from. And instead, special interests say, we're going to tell you who your next alderman's going to be. And so we just said, well, we got a different opinion. And we published this full page in Hyde Park, which is in the north part of the ward. It's the biggest collection of voters.
Okay.
And the idea was, we're not trying to, spend all our time on this thing. We just want to say, look, if we persuade enough people that this guy isn't the guy, all that money may not amount to anything. And our hope is we just want these special interests out of our elections. We're not trying to get the money that they have. We don't want his money. We want him and his special interests and his PACs to leave us alone. We've raised quite a bit of money, and from quite a few people ourselves. We're probably the second largest, campaign chest. It is modest, but it is the second largest. It's very hard to raise money in politics generally. Illinois makes it extremely hard for people who aren't connected. And so it's the playing field's not level. And in Black communities, because we've talked about this all night, people don't have assets. So to ask people to give, it hurts my heart a little bit to say, I recognize you don't have much, but to fix it, I need a little bit of what you have. And so you're getting 11 of us doing that. And then number 12 rolls in with $150,000 from, powerful interest. And there's just no reason,
We've got so much to talk about. There's probably 3 or 4 more streams that I'd love to get you on at some point once things get settled down after the election.
I'd love to.
Because my thing, what you did was you brought facts out about somebody, because this is the political garbage that we have to deal with people telling lies. And it's only on the people who are versed enough to know this stuff. Most voters aren't going to understand that this guy really isn't one of them, because he can come in and smooth talk him and tell him this and that. And truly, he is a implant. He's what I call a transient. He's not somebody who's really here, for the collective and for the community. He's just here for the comeuppance, and what I see you as is not only being a resident and being locked into the community and trying to see it grow. People got to understand this is all about years from now, what they're trying to lay the groundwork with now. You're not coming in saying, hey, for the next 4 years, this is what we're trying to do. No, you're talking about from now on. This is what we need to do from now on. We know where we've been. So, and a lot of these politicians are saying, if I'm elected for the next 4 years, because they ain't going to promise you shit after them 4 years. So they're going to tell you for the next 2 years, for the next 4 years, you're saying with some substantive things from now on, multi-phase investment plan, housing stabilization, establishment of the Freedmen's Bureau, accountability in police and public safety. You're not talking about things just that are going to just run you through your political terms. So this guy here, you always know these people if they're really for the community. Like I said, you've already picked him apart with this type of situation. Going forward, this is what we've got to rid, because he's everywhere. He's not just in Chicago, in Ward 5.
No, you're right about that.
There's a guy like him in every situation, and we've got to get those people out. And that's why I try to tell people, this is why I have to talk to politicians that don't look like me, because most of our politicians are saying, if elected, I want to do this during my time here. No, I need to know how things are going to change forever, dog. I don't need to know how things are just going to change while you're in office. I need to know that they're not going to kick back after you get out of office, and I'm gonna be fighting the next dude that's talking
Right.
the same thing you're talking. So
Yes.
that's a great way to really end this, because we got so much. We could have went so many different directions, but I wanted to keep it on a stage of not being so conventional and traditional. And you've given
You
us a
did
lot
that.
now. Thank you. What
Thank
do you
you,
do?
thank you.
What do you do in the 5th Ward to win? What's normally the amount of votes? Because I know that every
This
single
is such a
person in
good
the
question.
how many
Yeah.
votes does it take to win that 5th Ward seat? You
So
know,
here's the deal. We've got about 26,000 registered voters, 27.5 maybe. Of
okay,
those, about 12,000 come out and vote.
okay,
If it's hot, we might get a little bit over 13,000. There are
okay,
11 of us running. So these numbers are crazy. You know, it's hard. A normal win number would be a little bit over 7,000 is a guaranteed
mhm.
win. You're not going to get 7,000 with 10 other people in the race.
No, no,
It will be mathematically rather challenging.
right,
6,500 if it's 13,000 people. You know, 6,001 if it's 12. So what there's every reason to also plan, in addition to an outright win, to plan on a runoff. So then you're really
okay,
thinking, well, can we make it? Can we make it through? So here's the calculation Marlon and I talk about just about every day.
okay,
I got a little under 25% of the vote when I ran in 2019. I was
okay,
250 votes away from being in a runoff with the incumbent.
okay,
A lot of those were on the north end of the ward. I did very well in Hyde Park. I was the editor of the local newspaper there. I lived there for a while. And we have spent some time really with this kind of work we've been doing tonight, talking about issues that I think will resonate more in neighborhoods with more freedmen. And I think that's
Mhm.
our what we've been thinking. So the question is, and we don't know yet, we're going to find out, have I been able to make the white folks who voted for me, and a lot of those votes, not all of them, but a substantial number, were white in the north end of the ward, have I made them stretch? Did they say, all
Okay.
right, I liked this guy 4 years ago. He still seems pretty good. He's talking a little crazy about this reparation stuff, but maybe that's okay. Maybe I can go with this. And so, the equation we're trying to figure out and the balance we're trying to strike is to let these folks know I'm still with you. Nothing's
Mhm.
changed. When we
Mhm.
say Freedmen first, we do not say, and other people can forget about it. This isn't about getting revenge. This isn't about punishing anybody. This is about, you cannot have a viable economy I think anywhere, but let's keep it real simple, in a community that's 58% freedmen, if that's not the people you start with,
Right.
especially when you got a 15 to 20% unemployment rate. You have the highest eviction rate in the city. You have the highest foreclosure rate in the city. You got to start with the folks who are dealing with that economic reality.
Mhm.
So our hope is those folks who supported me last time, a substantial number say, all right, we'll stick with you. You're talking a little different, but we'll stick with you. Because it's not that much different. Like Marlon said, I really was just educated, but the ideas were in the same neighborhood.
Mhm.
And then we're hoping that this kind of work, and we're so grateful to you, because this is the deal, is if people are looking at this stuff and they're thinking about, I live in the ward and this seems, pretty compelling to me, that we get some of that southern end of the ward energy as well. And that gets us through. What is that number? I want to say if we do between 3,000 and 4,000 votes, there's a very good chance that we're locked in that runoff, that we get in.
Okay.
And I'm going to
Okay.
tell you what, with Marlon by my side, and Arthur and Cynthia and Linda, these other folks, but with Marlon, who does not sleep, I think we're going to knock it out of the park if we can clear the field. The
Mhm.
challenge for us has been, you trying to explain to folks who aren't necessarily getting reparations and understanding it, what that is. And literally in some forums, it's a 30-second soundbite you've got to explain yourself. And then you're trying to explain to the folks on the south end of the ward that, yeah, I'm a white guy, but this is, this is for real, and we're doing this actually as a team in
Mhm.
30 seconds. That's not easy. That's
That's
kind
not
of a
easy.
challenge.
Right.
So, but if we can get to that general into the runoff, and it's us and someone else, now we got some time. We got a little
Right.
room to move a little bit. So that's the
Right.
plan. We'll see what happens. No matter what, this has been a blessing. Conversations like this are gold. And I love that in this day and age, this is now forever.
Yeah.
People, if you're in late, we broke down some specific economic strategies you can use in your own community. You can reach out to us through the website, gabe45.com. Yeah,
You
we're
know,
asking for donations. You can talk to us.
Yeah.
Talk to you about what we're trying to do. This is
Let
let me get Gabe off here before his wife kill him.
I know. That's what I'm saying, because I know you need to go to sleep. And I'm thinking to myself, I was like, Gabe's married. Wait a minute. So yeah, mine done gave up. She took her medicine. She done gave up on me. So I'm gonna go up and get cussed out in a minute. But just what I want to do, I want to thank you now. Please do your closing comments. All I'm gonna do is say goodbye and hit my outro, because you just dropped nuggets on Freedmen Media. People that listen to me, they listen to me. I mean, they don't generally hear this type of wisdom coming across. And I appreciate Marlon. I appreciate your partnership with Gabe. I appreciate the scholarship that you've given this brother. Gabe threw Naheem out earlier, Mr. Just the Facts. I want people to understand we might always be rolling together, but we together. Like yes, the people that's still rolling together, we might not always agree with what one another's saying, but we together. And where Gabe is at, because I done caught a little bit of the rigmarole. I ain't been a part of it and been to some of these chat rooms and whatnot, but I've seen you misunderstood purposely and ignorantly and not being able to give a chance to defend yourself. And I said, you know what? Sometimes we shoot our own selves in the foot for silly shit. I appreciate Marlon being there for you, and not just to be your backstop, not to be your security guard, but to clear a lot of stuff up, as well as Brother Arthur, as well as Sister Cynthia, Sister Linda, and other people have come along, Naheem, and held spaces out of respect of what you're doing, because you ain't here as a white savior. I saved that term tonight because I didn't want to just throw it out there, because I got a whole cast on white saviors in my community coming up. You are not a white savior. You are somebody that understands the need, but you're also in the community. See, it's different than a politician coming in saying, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, and then they go back to their little posh area. You right here in the community, you right there with it. So you're giving people not only what they see every day, but you're advocating for those very people. You're not just advocating for people of color, you're advocating for the people that you live right amongst. So I appreciate you, brother. Marlon, if you got closing words, please do so. Gabe, if you got closing words, say your goodbyes. I'm going to hit the intro out because I'm an overtalker, so I don't want to overtalk no more. So I appreciate y'all. Do your thing.
Thank you once again. Gabe45.com. Election day, Gabe45.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is, all of this is local. Wherever you are, and however it looks, we got to do this everywhere. So, Marlon and I are real focused right now on this election. Obviously, we're going to get to the other side of it at some point. And, we want to be able to do for others what people have done for us. So, any help you can give us locally right now, we appreciate it. And, this movement is for me, my legacy. I'm over 50. So I'm looking behind me at more years than I'm looking ahead of me.
Right.
And when we talk about Freedmen, we're talking about my wife, my children. And this is, I want my grandchildren to be able to say, Grandpa did something. He stood up for what was important. And that's, and I'm grateful to you because y'all are holding space for me to do this. I'm a guest at this table and I always will be. And that, that's just how it is. And I accept it. It's not a weird thing or anything. It's just what it is. And so I have gratitude all the time. It's actually a wonderful feeling to be surrounded by people, who are generous enough to give you space when they don't have to. So I thank you, sir.
Appreciate
Marlon,
you, bro.
Don't be too mad at me. And when my wife calls you, I apologize in advance.
I appreciate y'all. I'm going to hit this outro, but vote for Gabe Piemonte, Ward 5 for Alderman on the 28th. If you are in Chicago, Ward 5. If you are outside of Chicago area, gabe45.com. You can hit that donate button, contribute to be able to push this thing forward. to make sure he does get in that runoff. Now, is there a situation where you can win outright where you're not in the runoff?
Yes.
Okay,
possible.
I'm ignorant to that. Okay, there is possible.
Yep.
Well, let's not get in a runoff.
Plus one. Okay.
So I was thinking that the runoff was just let's win this shit on the 28th, so we ain't got to deal with the.
That's what Marlon wants to do.
Yeah, let's win this thing, because that truly. I mean, you need to be already doing your thing by April. And let them other people be in a runoff. We want to win this thing outright. But I appreciate all the family that checked in tonight, that held me down tonight. Like this video if you're on Facebook, YouTube. Please push this algorithm. If you're watching from Twitter, I get 3-4 views over there. Like this video, gabefor5.com. Donate to Gabe's campaign. My tongue's getting tired. I'm getting late. My tea's gone. I didn't hit enough of this spliff. So there's a whole lot of things. I got a whole lot of problems underlying issues right now. So I'm going to get up out of here, but I appreciate y'all fellas, and we're going to talk again real soon.
Peace.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
This revolution is filled with so many ironies, really. First, you tell us that it is manly to keep your word, right? If you are a man, you keep your word. And now all of the black people in this country are demanding, and even the black people in the whole world are demanding, is that you keep your word. You told us we were free. Well, then show us that we're free. You told us that there is justice, equality for all in this country. Well, then stick to your word and let us see the justice and equality for all. Or else admit to us that you're not a man, you're a worm, you're afraid of us, you're afraid to give us equal stand. You're afraid that if you give us equal ground, that we will match you and we will override you.